Chapter 381 End. At this moment, Guy's condition is not only bad, it is simply sad for those who hear it and those who see it. After he pulled out the ice cube from his chest, what was left on him was a blood hole with a diameter that Loya could crawl into. Through the shredded meat of the orangutan Yuhi and the white bones, the three of them could even see the squirming of Guy's internal organs. In addition, the skin around him is even more shocking. The hardness of Loya's ice is obvious to all, not to mention the sarcoma buried under the skin with the thickness of each finger. Even if it is just a small ice line like hair, it has the hardness comparable to steel. So, with Guy's more pulling, he not only pulled out the ice Jinchuriki column around his chest, but also pulled out the tiny ice lines that had spread all over his body. Loya knew that in ancient times there was a kind of punishment called skinning, which peeled off the outer skin little by little while a person was alive, and the victim would mourn and die in unspeakable pain, which is extremely cruel. But what Guy is doing now is using this punishment on himself. The ice lines that were pulled out directly stuck to the inside of the skin. With Guy's many movements, he tore off a large piece of the surrounding skin, exposing the greasy muscle tissue of the orangutan Yuhi. A large amount of blood paused for a moment, and then rushed out like a dam that had opened a gate, and dripped down the feet along Guy's body, and soon formed a pool of blood. Not to mention Loya, even Aokiji and Kayabu, who were born and bred and were used to seeing the vicious side of pirates, were quite frightened by Guy. However, the psychological quality of the two of them was much better than that of Loya, but after a little stunned, they carefully observed Guy's injuries. Like Guy Duo, they thought that eliminating the ice cubes could stop the flow of vitality. Without the help of Loya's move, if Guy's injuries are not serious, then the strategy must be adjusted. However, seeing this, the two suddenly felt relieved. Although the area where the skin was torn off was terrifying, the two of them were gasping for breath, but that didn't have much effect on Guy's combat effectiveness. Who among the famous powerhouses in the sea has no way to restrain such a thing as simple pain? But the big pit on the chest gave the two of them an opportunity. At the place where the ice block stayed, the surrounding muscles and internal organs all turned blue-purple like a corpse. Even the beating heart, the side close to the ice cube was gray, which made people worried that it would stop beating in the next second. Since the injury is so serious, doesn't it mean that Guy has lost the power to continue to explode? The two looked at each other, and immediately rushed towards Guy, who was gasping for breath. Taking advantage of your illness is killing you. Not only Kizaru and Aokiji planned this way, but also Loya. When the two attacked Guy Duo from the front, Loya flapped his wings and came behind Guy Duo. His pale blue scales instantly turned pitch black, and a deep blue lightning flashed from time to time, which was really beautiful. But unlike this beauty, Loya's attack is particularly deadly. He put his fists together and stretched forward with a slight bend, just waiting for more Guy to be attached, and he was ready to smash his heart in one fell swoop. In the face of the three people who were attacking back and forth, Guy didn't panic much. He let out a light breath and watched the three of them close to his chest and back. Those heart-pounding terrorist attacks are already ready to go, and in the next instant, their hearts can be broken. However, at this moment, Guy suddenly moved. Give me, go away. The scale tattoo on his body suddenly burst out with a shocking Yuhi light. Whether it was Aokiji and Kayabu in front, or Loya who was attacking from behind, there was a sense of crisis facing death at this moment. Then, in just an instant, the three of them unbearably spit out a large pool of blood, and immediately flew out. Although he didn't understand what happened to Guy's many attacks, he knew through the skin contact with Loya that it was just a normal fist. But this time, the fist is stronger and fiercer than ever before. Click. After the three of them flew upside down, Guy put on a punching stance, and the air around his body suddenly sounded a crisp shattering sound. A faint inaudible black line that was more delicate than a hair appeared in the air. Seeing this, Loya's eyes suddenly widened. Fist breaks the void. Do you want to talk like this? Although it was only a little bit, the dangerous aura revealed from the black line made Loya's dragon scales tighten a bit. He is an old bird who has been reading online articles for decades, and he recognized the root of the black line at a glance. It's just that before he could take a closer look, a gust of wind suddenly and violently erupted around him, and the muffled thunder-like sound was wrapped in sand and stones, and he was directly sent flying out of the unbearable pain. That was because of the air pressure generated by Guy's many punches, and just a little aftermath of the attack formed a terrifying airflow comparable to a tornado. Because of the air current, endless sand and stones poured into the sky, even obscuring the bright moonlight. Everything around is constantly rolling in the wind, and several tons of stones are fluttering into the sky, like the end of the world, dangerous and terrifying. Originally this punch was prepared for Whitebeard. Guy looked at the three people who were missing and took a breath. You should be honored. After all, Guy clutched his chest and quickly walked away. As Aokiji and Kyabu judged, although there was no ice, his vitality was preserved, but the huge hole caused him serious injuries, and he had lost the capital to continue fighting. Don't look at all three being punched by Guy. One more punch, but this terrifying punch is divided into 3 punches, and everyone's injuries are not fatal enough. Once 2 people recover, they will die here. Right now, he can't wield a few fists like that. Loya's physique is the strongest, and he struggled to raise his head when Aokiji and Kyabu were still huddled together. In the sense of vitality, Guy was running away quickly, and immediately shouted. Don't run away, son thief. Come and fight Grandpa for 300 rounds. This is a rare opportunity. Kill the 4 emperors. Guy more. What an honor this will be. If he just let Guy run away, even if he has a plan, he will feel unwilling. But when he heard Loya's insulting scolding, Guy didn't stop at all, and ran directly to the edge of the desert. Christopher Loya, remember, we haven't decided yet. Next time, just next time, I will definitely kill you. Listening to Guy's threats, Loya was about to get up and catch up. It is not a pleasant thing to be remembered by one of the 4 emperors. It's just that he just propped up his arms, and the pain from his chest made him stumble to the ground. The punch Guy prepared for the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard, was still terrifyingly dazzling even though it was scattered over the 3 of them. He can still fight, but he needs a little time to breathe. It's just that this time is enough for Guy to run away. Chapter 382 Precious Photos. Rohit is a reporter. Although he was scolded as a dead paparazzi, a stalker, and was thrown cow dung at his house, he still loves his profession, and he took precious photos without fear of difficulties and compiled them into a book. Post it for the world to see. When he heard that King Cobra of Alabasta was going to hand over the historical text to the world government, he was keenly aware of the news value in it. In fact, the news value in it is probably not overlooked by anyone. Come out. However, it is precisely because of the news value in it that few newspapers dare to come to Alabasta. As Loya said when he was tested by Aokiji to evacuate the people before, because of the manpower problem, the Navy has not yet opened up a safe area where the people can settle in with peace of mind. In the whole of Alabasta, large areas of no man's land and remote towns have almost become a paradise for pirates. Pirates don't care whether you are a reporter or not, and in their eyes, newspapers are a very rich industry. So as long as it is discovered, it will definitely swarm and rob and kill in waves. So until now, although the situation in Alabasta has attracted the attention of the world, the internal reports are only in Albana and the vicinity of the town of Rape Flower where the Navy is stationed. Rohit also landed from Rape Flower Town. The reporters in One Piece world are a bunch of mad dogs. They dare to attack the world government and the Navy, and they dare to attack the 4 emperors and pirates. So after he landed, the Navy officer in charge of registration didn't restrict his freedom, as long as he didn't run around and get into trouble. So, this gave Rohit a chance. He wants to take first-hand information and get higher achievements. Is there any topic that can be more topical than the poor protection of the Navy and the misery of ordinary people under the oppression of pirates? So Lovett took his companions, sneaked out of the naval defense line at night, and walked all the way along the coast, preparing to go to the small town outside the forbidden area of life. Because of the remote location where pirates are rampant, many people can be seen on the way with their children and their daughters, riding camels toward Rakeflower Town. After taking these precious materials, Lovett put away the photos and moved on. Then, he met the pirates who came out following the people to fight the autumn wind. Fortunately, those were the lucky ones who didn't make it to the top. After crossing the upside-down mountain, they sadly found that they were really weak. Any pirate group could bully them, and even the guards accompanying a merchant ship couldn't beat them. Life was once in a state of embarrassment, and even eating was a problem. But let them go back upside down again, they don't have the courage. As a result, they can only rob ordinary people in order to barely maintain a living like this. Rowett is out of luck because of a wild reporter's nutritional value. Bah! A reporter's wealth is definitely more than the group of displaced refugees. After discovering their group, the pirates turned their attention to him and met Yuhi on the spot. However, Rowett was lucky, because the pirates lacked manpower and strength, so they did not chase him who fled to the desert hinterland. After running all the way into the middle of the night, making sure that the pirates did not catch up, Lovett leaned behind a stone and took out the water bottle that was placed close to him to moisten his throat. Looking at the bright moon in the sky, Lovett's heart was full of sadness at the moment. This small pot of water can't get me out of the desert, and this camera hanging around my neck can't be eaten. The desert night was cold and windy, and the starving Rowett hugged his knees and curled up behind the stone, hoping to warm himself up a bit. At this moment, there was a sound of thump, thump, and he, who was already tense, turned over and got up, probing his head from behind the stone to reveal his two eyes. Something is coming, Lovett thought about it, and then saw a tall figure rushing out of the darkness. Under the bright moonlight, Lovett looked at the hideous wound and almost didn't hold his breath. Go! But even so, Lovett took out his camera instantly and aimed it at the figure. Because he suddenly discovered that the one who ran all the way and dripped blood on the beach turned out to be one of the most powerful pirates in the sea. 4 emperors. There are many beasts and guys. Guy actually came to Alabasta. This was Rowett's first reaction. Guy injured. This is Rowett's second reaction. His thinking became stiff because of Guy's frequent appearances, but Lovett's journalistic instincts still made him decisively press the camera button. Click. The flash flashed by, attracting Guy's eyes. Then, a stone was kicked by Guy with one more kick and shot him in the head. The hard skull didn't offer him any protection, like a big watermelon, and Yuhi's white fell all over the floor. Ignoring the little bug, Guy went all the way, looking at the direction. It was the remote town where the pirates were ravaging. And the camera that took the precious photo was soaked in a pool of blood, and the lens shone dimly under the moonlight. In the desert, or in the canyon, Loya slowly climbed up. Release the Dragon King Shikai, panting and looking around. Soon, through the perception of vitality, he found the traces of Aokiji and Kayabu. He hurriedly limped over and dug out the two of them and lay down on the stone. Loya was relieved, and when he looked up, he fell down. After a while, Aokiji woke up. He first subconsciously got up and assumed a defensive posture, then looked at the surrounding situation, unloaded it in one breath, and fell back. Breathing heavily, Aokiji smiled bitterly and said to Loya, "This time, it's really hard for you, Loya." Hee. Loya turned over Byakugan and said that he didn't want to pay attention to him. If he didn't find out that he could use the power of death to erode Guy, but went directly to the second stage of Guy's toughness, then he would have to be beaten to death. Get ready. On the other side, there were 2 hoarse roars in his throat, and then he coughed, and he also woke up. Sitting on the stone, Kizaru first looked around blankly, then turned his head to look at the 2 and asked, "Loya, how many guys are there?" "Ah, ran away." Loya waved his hand and said weakly. "Hey." Although seeing that there were no more Guy's corpses on the battlefield, Kizaru had an answer in his heart, but when he heard the answer, he couldn't help but sigh with regret. What a chance. It's so close. No no no, it's a little worse. Loya shook his head and denied Kizaru's statement. With our current strength, there is still no way to take Guy's external defense. This is the most critical and most helpless point. Then the last punch that Guy duo punched was even powerful enough to tear apart the space. Even if the power is dispersed, it can seriously injure you. This is the second point. Third, Loya sighed faintly. With the lesson learned this time, Guy will definitely not give me a chance to inject the power of death into his body next time, which means there is a very high probability that you can only face Guy duo head-to-head, that difficulty. Let alone. In order to condense the power of death that is enough to threaten Guy, it takes a long time to prepare in advance. And he must seize the opportunity at the moment when Guy has more attack intervals, otherwise with that weird movement ability, he will not want to touch Guy with an extra hair. This time he was hit hard, and if Guy doesn't get serious, the next time will definitely be his death. He is a lunatic and not a fool. How could such a good thing happen to Loya? After listening to Loya's words, Kizaru scratched his head, and after thinking about it, he found that it was indeed the case, and it became even more regrettable in an instant. After a short rest, Aokiji stood up slowly, held his knees and said, "Let's go back to recuperate. The appearance of many guys is just an accident, and the plan must continue." "Ah, Aokiji, did you have time to be so diligent?" Kizaru smiled slyly, but he still got up according to his words, but he just stood firm, and the next moment his legs softened and he sat down again. "No way, I have to rest for a while," Kizaru said breathlessly. It seemed that this simple action made him quite tired. His physique was not as good as the other two, and because he was too old, he couldn't compete with the green pheasant and the monster Loyabe, who were in their prime. Faced with such a situation, Loya summoned his magic power, summoned 3 ice wolves, turned over and rode on them. "Come up, I don't want to walk back." Then, the 3 of them rode the ice wolf and ran towards the stronghold where Major General Lo was. Chapter 383, The Brain Behind Guy Duo. Naturally, the speed of his ice wolf could not be compared with their own. By the time they arrived at the camp, the sky was already bright. Hearing the soldier's notification, he was apprehensive in the middle of the night. Major General Lo, who had just lay down and rested, lifted the quilt and got up without a word, and hurried to the center tent. While walking, tidying up his clothes, and then standing in front of the tent, Major General Lo saluted and shouted, "Report. Please come in." With permission, Major General Luo Wei opened the cloth and walked in. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Aokiji and Kayabu who were bandaging their wounds at a glance. Especially the depression in Kizaru's chest made him stunned. It hurt so badly. There are so many 4 Emperor guys, are they really that scary? But these are not things that he can ask at will. He retracted his gaze and came to Loya. "Lieutenant General Loya. May I ask what you want from me?" "Thank you for your hard work, Luo Wei," Luoya said to him with a smile, and then took a sip from the jug. "General Kizaru will stay here to recuperate after a while. I will transfer his accompanying troops when I go back, and pick them up. In the next time, you must protect him." "Protect, Kayape." Luo Wei blinked, unable to believe his ears. What kind of existence is General Kizaru? How could I possibly need my protection? Just as he was about to speak, he saw Kizaru waving at him. Luo Wei had to put aside his doubts and walked over curiously. "General Yellow Monkey, what's the matter with you?" Cough cough. Huang Yuan coughed twice, then sat up with the help of the medical staff, and said to Luo Wei, "This time I was injured too badly. I don't want to recover my fighting power in a short time. If any pirates come to seek revenge on me, I need you, Major General Lo, to help me resist." Luo Wei looked at the depression in Kizaru's chest, then turned to look at Luoya who was drinking casually, and suddenly understood something. "I understand, Mr. Yellow Monkey." Hearing this, Aokiji, Kizaru and Loya looked at each other, smiled and said nothing. Rohit's disappearance was quickly reported, and the school official who stayed behind in Rakeflower Town was helpless and sighed. So, reporters are really not afraid of death. Now you can find pirates in almost any place except where the major legions and navies of Alabasta are stationed. Just swaggeringly running out of the naval protection, this is no longer a question of courting death, but the rhythm of how to die. However, the other party was a reporter from the Chambord newspaper, so he could not let the other party seize the opportunity to criticize the Navy. So he had to send a search and rescue team to follow the direction Rohit left, hoping to find him. Along the way, they met the refugees that Rohit had photographed before. After questioning, they told the Navy that a group of reporters met pirates in the desert, and the middle-pointed blonde man fled to the restricted area of life. This is unlucky. The soldiers had to turn around and step into the sand sea in the restricted area. Soon, they discovered something unusual. "Captain, come and see." A soldier ran over in a panic and pulled up his own captain who was sitting and drinking water. "What's all the fuss about?" Following the soldier's guidance, he came to a pool of blood that had solidified into a red-black crust, and immediately narrowed his eyes. Judging from the size of this pool of blood, if someone hadn't been drained of blood, then some huge creature was injured. Looking in the direction the soldier pointed, the bloodstain spread all the way from the center of the desert to here, and the direction was exactly where the remote town was. Just when he felt strange, he suddenly carefully observed a pool of blood under his feet, and then knocked open the hard shell with a knife, and immediately gasped. The pool of blood that dripped on the stone and solidified, the deep pit was not formed naturally, but a huge footprint. Go and see." Half an hour later, they found Lovett's half-buried body in yellow sand not far from the footprints. The dunes in the desert are not static. When the wind blows, it usually only takes a short time for the dunes to move quickly. They were lucky, at least they found the body. "Team, Captain." It was the same soldier from before, with his trembling hands holding the camera that should have been Lovett's relic, where the last photo had been printed under the camera. "This is..." After seeing the photo, the captain decisively ordered, "Everyone, follow me along the footprints. You guys, immediately ask Lieutenant General Loya about the situation." After speaking, the team leader and the soldiers abandoned the heavy rucksacks, went into battle lightly, and rushed towards the town in a hurry. There are many beasts and guys, but they were injured. Still such a terribly serious injury. No matter what the strength gap is, they have to try to see if they can keep him. This is the duty of a navy facing pirates. After receiving the news from the soldiers, Loya understood Guy's intentions after a little thought. This time, he obviously ran out by himself again, not to mention his subordinates and boats, not even his weapon, the wolf Kiba. Now that he's running away, he obviously needs a boat. On the other side of the forbidden area of life, although there are several prosperous small cities, because of the deep desert hinterland, even if there is a boat, it will not be able to sail to the sea. So Guy's choice is only the small town occupied by pirates. Since there are so many pirates, it is still very easy to find a boat. It's just that with Guy's brain, can he think of these escape plans? To say that this was a plan that Guy made by himself, then Loya would be 100 unbelievers. Sitting on the ice wolf going to Rakeflower Town, when he heard Luo Ya's question, Qingzi thought for a while and said, "There has always been a guy behind the four emperors Guy who gave him advice. His identity is very mysterious and his strength is unknown, but Guy Duo still respects his words. To be able to investigate clearly and plan the direction of the retreat should be his more planning for Guy. Does the strongest fist match a smart brain?" Loya pondered. However, he didn't have much confidence in the hope that the search and rescue team would stop Guy. Even if it has been severely damaged, Guy Duo is not comparable to the group of pirates who dare not even set foot in the hinterland of the desert. One night was long enough for him to grab the boat and leave the coast. And since the brain behind Guy Duo can plan an escape route for him, the ghost knows whether he will leave behind anything, and it is too risky to use a warship to catch up. Anyway, this time Guy was hit so hard this time, and the photo was left by that person named Rowett by mistake. The prestige of the Navy will definitely usher in a new peak. It can be considered that the goal has been achieved. The fact was as expected by Loya. When the two of them arrived at Rapeflower Town, the Expedition Army unfortunately came to the news that Guy ran away. Not only did he run away, he also vented and killed all the pirates in the entire town, leaving the house and other ships behind. When the expeditionary force arrived at the town, all they saw was a rubble and various corpses that were horribly dead. The two were not surprised by this result. After a short rest, Loya arranged for someone to call Sengoku to inform him and prepare to report the situation to him. Chapter 384 Undercurrent. The Marine Headquarters Marine Fodder, the Marshal's office. At this moment, several big bosses who stayed in the Navy gathered together, and the soldiers patrolling outside, frightened by the quarrel, hurriedly accelerated their pace, for fear that they would be involved. It is said that there are several big bosses, but in fact there are only 3 people in the office. Counting Sengoku's seagulls and goats, there are only 5 living creatures in total. As for the reason for the quarrel, of course, it was because of the photo that Lovett took. Akainu, who pursues absolute justice, believes that this is a God-given opportunity. Guy has been hit hard now, and he doesn't know how long it will take to recover. Moreover, they are still far away in Alabasta. They can completely eliminate Guy's forces with a time difference. But Lieutenant General Crane did not agree with this plan. If the Beast Pirates were a pirate group that could be easily disbanded as long as the leader failed, they would have taken the opportunity to eliminate Guy's forces long ago. Therefore, Lieutenant General Crane's view is to spread the news, on the one hand to increase the prestige of the Navy, on the other hand to promote Guy's weakness, and let the group of supernovas and ambitious big pirates who do a lot of things every year challenge them. There are too many guys, so they can kill with a knife. Sengoku is more inclined to the Crane's argument, but Akainu's approach is not absolutely wrong. After all, before this, the Navy had never pushed Guy into such a desperate situation. Looking at the heart exposed on Guy's chest in the photo, Sengoku squeezed Kiba Hanako with empathy. This kind of injury, even the monster with more Guy will be difficult to recover. If they attacked the whole army now, it is really possible to destroy the beasts in one fell swoop and turn the 4 emperors into 3 emperors. But the problem came again. Even if Guy left a lot, the rest of the beast pirates would not be easy to deal with. The 3 disasters under him are not only powerful, but the quality of the soldiers is also outrageous. If the Navy really wants to fight at most 6 or 4, the casualties will be very heavy. And once the naval power is shifted, isn't this a clear opportunity for the pirates to make trouble? The balance that has been created by hard work for decades is very likely to be completely broken by one word of oneself. At that time, the entire sea will be rolled up in a terrible storm. There is also the Silence Army and Chiwahai. If they are in chaos together, the situation will not be taken care of by the Navy. So Sengoku has been unable to make a decision, listening to the quarrel between Tsuru and Akainu, with a frown. Whatever happened on weekdays, Akainu would definitely not quarrel with Crane, and he would take a step back according to the other party's wishes. To put it horribly, Lieutenant General Crane has eaten more salt than he has eaten, and he is able to become the general staff of the Navy headquarters. The intelligence of the other side can be seen as Madara. But now this matter is different. Whether it is Crane or himself, the opinions of the two are actually very implementable. Lieutenant General Crane's opinion has few benefits, but low risks. And their own interests are large and the risks are high, and no one can convince anyone. As a result, the matter fell into a stalemate. Just when the two took a breath and took a sip of water to continue convincing each other, Loya's phone called again. This made the two temporarily put aside the matter in dispute and looked at Sengoku to hear if there was any latest information to bring down the other party's remarks. However, the two of them miscalculated. Sengoku greeted Loya with a smile, his face immediately turned gloomy. Do you know what you are talking about, Loya? This kind of thing is no joke. The other side seemed to say something, and then, Sengoku put down the phone bug with a gloomy expression on his face. Seeing this, Crane frowned and asked, "What happened to Sengoku? Did that kid Loya get into trouble again?" "No, someone is bothering us." After a moment of silence, Sengoku raised his head to look at the two of them, and said slowly, "This matter will be implemented according to Crane's plan, causing more trouble for Guy Marshall." Akainu stood up to say something, but was pushed back by Sengoku's stern eyes. Afterwards, Sengoku let out a suffocating breath and continued, "Now we can't mobilize troops on a large scale. Because the Antonio family of the Tianlong people sent CP0 to Albana yesterday to take away the historical text." Antonio family. Akainu's eyes suddenly widened. It turned out to be the #1 family in the world. And, what did they do? Take away historical texts. Well, the 5 old stars didn't notify us, right? Hiiran was a little surprised, and asked a question that pointed directly to the key. That's right. Sengoku gently stroked the goat beside his feet, and the pair of eyes under Toad's glasses slowly closed. This is the first time in a decade that Antonio disregarded the orders of the 5 old stars and wanted to intervene to get something. 10 years. Akainu is also an older generation who has lived through that era, and he understands what Sengoku is referring to. So, he first stood up and said to the two, "Since this is the case, then I will arrange for the soldiers to spread the news." "Well, I'll take a look at it too, lest any accident happen." Lieutenant General Crane got up and left the office with Akainu. Sengoku was left alone, with his eyes closed and his brows furrowed, thinking silently in the office. He's not in Albana. That was just a fake. The big man in the white suit known as Zulkin waved his fists indignantly, wheezing the air. This is a castle that once belonged to a nobleman in Albana, but now, it has become a temporary residence for CP0. After listening to Zulkin's words, on the sofa beside, the woman lying on the side smiled and joked, "But before that, do you dare to try him if it's real?" Loya's reputation is not only spread among pirates, even CP0 is unwilling to fight against that kind of monster, let alone shoot directly. "Dina, are you courting death?" Zuljan roared angrily, turned around and looked at her angrily. "Well, stop arguing." The little man who had been squatting on the chair watching the play raised his hand to comfort him. "Since he's not in Albana, why don't we steal the historical text at night, and we can even kidnap Zephyr and Cobra, use this as a threat to keep him from attacking us." "Do you think so, Captain?" His voice is very gentle, with a feeling of weakness, like a child who has not yet grown up, clean and charming. But the plan he said was insidious and ruthless, pointing directly to the heart of Loya, in stark contrast to that clean voice. Facing the question, the middle-aged man wearing a cartoon eagle mask smiled and turned the page of the newspaper in his hand. "If you want to die with those 2 old men, then do it. Believe me, once you do that, we won't get out of Alabasta." "Cut, it's so boring." Hearing this, the little man lowered his head and put it on the back of the chair. "I still want to collect the heads of all the beauties in this world. It's not worth it to die so early." "Hey, bully, by the way, you've never been interested in my face. Do you think my sister isn't pretty enough?" "Well, yes," Bully answered sincerely without thinking. "You bastard." Hearing the noise of his subordinates, the middle-aged man quietly picked up the teacup and took a sip. Looking at the direction of the palace, he whispered to himself, "Look carefully, what kind of monster did you teach to come out, Teacher Zephyr?" Chapter 385 Zubi and SPX9. Not far from Alabasta, there is a strange and uninhabited island. On weekdays, it is submerged in seawater of dozens of centimeters, and it only emerges from the sea in the late autumn and early eastern seasons every year. Because the island has nothing to do with cherishing resources, this peculiarity has never been taken seriously by anyone. It is precisely because of this uniqueness that today, the island welcomes several special guests. Guy is indeed seriously injured, there is no doubt about that. When Jack saw Guy Duo for the first time, he even rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "What is that?" The boss was so badly injured. Moreover, the thing that has turned blue and stinky on the ground over there looks like a heart. Guy's face was very bad. Even if his confidant, Jack of the Three Calamities and Drought, walked in front of him, he didn't show a single expression. He was still wrong last night. What Loya left in his body was not just the ice cube that could absorb his own vitality. On the contrary, it is just a pretense. It seemed that they were so nervous that the ice cubes were dug out by themselves, but they were actually muddying the lake for his real ultimate move and interfering with their own judgment. It was even said that even Aokiji and Kizaru were deceived. Because when he came to the island to sit down and rest, he realized that his vitality was still passing by. That is definitely not the weakness caused by excessive blood loss. Guy, who has control over his body as thin as a hair, is very clear, but the special attack of Loya, which has always stayed in his body. According to the speed of the passage he discovered at the time, at most 1 month, he will die because he loses all his vitality. This discovery shocked Guy. The ice dragon fruit has such power. After searching carefully, Guy Duokai finally found the source of the loss of vitality, which was his own heart. So, regardless of the wound that had begun to heal, Guy ripped open the flesh and performed a surgery on himself. He dug out his heart, which was constantly being eaten away by the force of death. If I didn't have that thing, I'm afraid I would really die here. Guy thought more silently. After waiting for a while, a big head suddenly protruded from the sea, and a strange-looking yuhi-colored goldfish pressed its jaw against the rocks on the island and opened its mouth. If Loya is here, he will find that this goldfish is the island-eating monster that appeared in the small garden in the original book. That huge body is not much smaller than that of Turtle Island, and with a flick of its tail, it can bring huge waves to the sky. However, at this moment, the island-eating monster opened its mouth not because it came to eat on this island. After it opened its mouth, a figure slowly walked out of the mouth. Seeing him, Guy snorted, "You're late, Zuwei." Oops, Big Baby is angry. The visitor didn't care about Guy's bluish complexion, and laughed giggly. His voice was shrill, and the words in his mouth made Guy's face even more ugly. Jack stood silently beside Guy Duo, not daring to look up. No one can guarantee that Guy Duo will go berserk in the future. He can only try to reduce his existence as much as possible, hoping to leave alive later. It seemed that he was worried about Guy's temper. After the person finished speaking, the topic changed. "Oh. You also need to consider my difficulties. Let the island eater go on his way honestly, which is more difficult than teaching you more. Besides, didn't I ask Jack to pick you up? Then you have to see how he got here." Guy exhaled 2 more breaths, Jinchuriki column, and stared at a pair of bull's eyes. "Riding on a big strange bird. It is really fast, but that strange bird can bear my weight. If you come later, wait for the Navy. Let's make dumplings." Every time a Navy warship passed around the island before, Guy had to be careful to avoid it. There are so many dignified emperors and many beasts and guys, when did they fall to this level? Just as Loya and the others were worried that Guy would stay behind to prevent him from chasing, Guy was also worried that they would try their best to catch up. Although Jack is strong, he is definitely not Loya's opponent. Not to mention that Aokiji and Kizaru are with him. After a battle, it is still unclear who will die and who will live. Therefore, Guy was very angry about Zuwei's late arrival. If the other party wasn't the teacher he had come all the way to today, he would have punched him long ago. After listening to Guy's words, Zuwei laughed giggling, took off the sapphire blue wide-brimmed hat on his head, and clamped the cane between the creaking nests, freeing his hands to dig something inside. "Oh, you know how strictly the Navy is guarding Alabasta right now. In order to avoid disturbing them, I held the cannibal's mouth for a day and a night. And, you see, I also brought you a gift." Quote. Dang dang dang. Zhu Wei raised his right hand and took out a syringe that was tightly wrapped in a metal casing. It was so sharp that it was hard to imagine how he usually put him in his hat. "SPX9, have you made another one?" Guy's Guy's eyes lit up when he saw the needle, and he grabbed it with his hands. Zhu Wei didn't dodge either, letting Guy take more things away. Using Kiba teeth to bite off the outer metal protective shell, Guy held the syringe more and stabbed him hard at the position of his heart. Puff! The steel needle is easily inserted into the meat without bending. Of course, Guy gave up resistance and active cooperation, but even so, the protective power of Guy's muscles should not be underestimated. It is conceivable that this needle tube is also a very good thing. With the pressing of his thumb, a tube of green stuff was injected into his body. Guy held his breath with his mouth wide open, his eyes wide open, as if he was suffering some kind of pain. But soon, this feeling quickly dissipated, and the scars on Guy's chest began to recover at a terrifying speed. The densely intertwined granulation buds were woven quickly, and in just a moment, the wound that was enough to see the heart healed, leaving only a circle of scarlet Yuhi-colored scars on the outside of the skin. Yes. Guy dug out his heart a lot, but he still had a heart inside him. When the wound healed, Guy looked haggard, as if a teenager who was addicted to the internet had been playing all night for a week in a row. He propped himself on the ground, his breath was sluggish, and there was a wrinkle on his firm and plump skin. However, these are normal reactions of using SPX9, and several people feel no surprise. Even though, this so-called normal reaction only has one more sample from Guy. What's next? Take a break to find a place to return. As Zhu Wei asked, he smashed the empty needle tube with a pestle, and then kicked the residue into the sea with one foot. This place will be found sooner or later. But not now. Guy looked in the direction of Alabasta and laughed dangerously. Ice dragon fruit, I want more and more. Chapter 386 Daily Life in Turtle Island. After running for several days, Jones finally made sure that he and others were not being targeted by any forces, which made the island turtle stop and rest in the windless belt. And he was busy counting the population on the island and rearranging the fortifications. No way, although not all the slaves were driven out to fight when they fought with Moria, the total population on Turtle Island was still a lot less. With fewer people, the previous arrangement becomes inappropriate, and appropriate changes are necessary. Ratchet, the former owner of Mechanical Island, knew that he was now tied to Jones. When Jones laid out new fortifications, he carefully adjusted various organs and weapons to make them better. Is used. Looking at those simple yet creative mechanisms, Robin walked over curiously and talked to Ratchet about the ingenuity of these mechanisms. Although he used to be an ambitious island owner, but Ratchet, a guy with poor emotional intelligence, is no match for Robin, who has a clever and exquisite heart. He even said that he also gave Robin the Iron Man No. 5, which he had just developed, debugged, and regarded as a treasure. The reason was just because the mountain road on the island was not easy to walk. Robin asked him for a means of transportation. Seeing that Jones and Kay Rockdale didn't know what to say, it's no wonder that even though his master has such exquisite mechanism technology, the mechanical island has been unknown. However, are you sure you just let her watch it? Rockdale played with the cigar in his hand and said to Jones, who was eating and feeding Steel Shadow, that woman is not that simple, wait until she finds out the situation on the island. I'm afraid there will be some trouble. It's not that Kay Rockdale is worrying. Regarding Nicole Robin, he thinks that there are few people in this world who know each other better than him, and know each other's character well. Hearing Rockdale's words, without waiting for Jones to answer, Drake pouted and denied it. It's useless even if she finds out about Turtle Island. You don't think Lieutenant General Loya has taken this into consideration? What happened? Now it's Robin who needs his shelter and a place to stay, and as long as she's not stupid, she won't betray us. And the island's secrets, even me, it has not been studied clearly. Quote. You mean, Captain? Jones paused as he grabbed the barbecue. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and said to Drake, please, I'll tell you. Humph. Dreaming. Drake said fiercely. You wait, after I beat you to become the boss, Lieutenant General Loya will naturally tell me these secrets. Yohu. Then you have to work hard. Jones was completely unafraid of Drake's challenge, and said something vulgar, and then continued to turn around to feed the steel shadow waiting to be fed. Secret. I'm afraid it's the power to come back from the dead. Seeing this scene, K. Rockthal thought silently, then he bit the cigar in his mouth and sighed faintly. The two of you have a really good relationship. Are you blind? Which I sees that I have a good relationship with him. Asterisk 2. The capital of Alabasta, Albana. Chingsy stayed in Rape Flower Town to take charge of the overall situation, and Luoya traveled lightly on the road by himself, and quickly arrived at the palace. The matter of going to sea is imminent, and it is naturally because something very important has happened that allows him to return to Albana at this critical juncture. At the same time, Loya also expressed concern for the safety of Zephyr and others. It is always good to go back and have a look. His face was the most perfect pass, and with the act of descending directly from the sky, the palace guards let him in without any hesitation. However, after Loya entered the gate, the two guards looked at each other strangely and whispered, "Mr. Loya, didn't you just go in just now? When did he go out?" "Shish, stop talking about these things. We're not the only entrance to the palace, why are you worrying about it?" Loya didn't care about the discussions of the two guards outside. Following his sole breath, he turned left and right, and soon came to the small courtyard where Zephyr lived. It just so happened that Cobra seemed to be preparing to go in too. He was swaying away the guards and turned his head to look, and he was instantly stunned. "Loya, you..." He paused, turned to look at the Loya in the courtyard, then turned to look at the Loya outside, and suddenly shouted loudly, "Come on, catch an assassin." "Loya." Tony in the yard was the fastest, and almost rushed out when he heard Cobra's shout, because he was moving too fast and didn't notice the look in the yard beckoning him not to make a fuss. After Cobra finished shouting, he ran into the yard and said to Zephyr and Loya, "Be careful. There is someone outside pretending to be Lieutenant General Loya, and Mr. Tony has already gone to deal with him." "Oh, you mean against me?" Just as Cobra finished speaking, a familiar voice sounded from behind him. He looked up at Loya in front of him, saw him spread his hands and shook his head to himself. Creak creak. Turning around stiffly, the fake Loya was standing behind him, carrying Tony who was frozen into a lump. My God. Cobra suddenly widened his eyes, suddenly closed his eyes, and fell to the ground with a snap. After a lot of dancing, Cobra, who woke up, sat at the table and looked at the two Loyas who were moving in the same way, even breathing the same frequency, and asked in a low voice, that, "Mr. Zephyr, which one of them is Lieutenant General Loya?" Ah chirp. After sneezing, Tony rubbed his nose and said to Cobra without raising his head, "From a philosophical point of view, both of them are Loya. And if you look at the definition of a human creature, the one on the left is Loya." Quote. Tony has an innate advantage in the perception of vitality, so there is nothing wrong with his words. Just. So, are you scolding me for not being human? The clone snorted coldly with a smile, and a terrifying magic power suddenly condensed on his fists. I'm just a kid, please spare me. The laughter ended, and Cobra finally believed in the fact that another Loya was his clone. Loya sat at the table, eating the food carefully cooked by the chef of the palace, and asked Zephyr, "So, what's the matter with you asking me to come here today, Teacher Zephyr? Our plan is about to start." "Well, Mr. Kuzan is still waiting for me to go back." "I'm looking for you, of course there is something important." Zephyr chewed and swallowed slowly. After hearing Loya's words, he continued to drink the soup, and then slowly said, "You know, the Antonio family." Chapter 387 Cloud Top Haze. Quote. The Antonio family. Loya chewed on the name silently. Regarding the Tianlong family, after the Lieutenant General, you can know the family name of Akatsuki and the others. However, the reason why he knew his identity as a Lieutenant General was because he was able to serve the Tianlong people, at least he had to have the strength of a Lieutenant General. In other words, a group of dogs that can't even run, Tianlong people don't look down on them. It's sad, but it's a fact. No matter how powerful the Navy is, it is still only an institution under the world government. Even the 5 old stars acquiesced to what the Tianlong people did. What can Sengoku do? And among all the celestial dragon families, except for the 5 celestial dragon families that appeared in the original work, whoever left the deepest impression on Loya must be the Antonio family. Because no matter what the information is or what is recorded, as long as 2 or more names of the Tianlong people appear at the same time, the word Antonio will always be at the forefront. Even the fonts and colors are different from others. Once or twice it can be explained by typography, but every time it is, the flavor of it is somewhat elusive. Thinking of this, Loya frowned and asked, "The people you said before CP0 came to ask you for historical texts because of the orders of the Antonio family, right? How strong are they?" The "they" mentioned here do not refer to CP0 Feet's group. If they could ignore Loya, they would have already started directly. Then on the other hand, since they can't ignore it, then the strength is like that. So what Loya is asking now is the strength of the Antonio family. Be honest with Loya. Zephyr doesn't know what he's thinking. There's nothing wrong with this mentality, but it's clear who the target is. The Antonio family is strong. There is no doubt about that. Zephyr frowned, and when he said this, he suddenly looked at Cobra who was on the side. For the rest, I'll ask King Cobra to introduce you to you. Neferutali, Cobra, Loya muttered to herself and nodded. Since that's the case, I'll tell you about the Antonio family. But this matter is limited to the 5 of us. 4 of us know, please understand my difficulty. Cobra had just finished saying 5, and then found that Loya and his avatar looked at him with strange expressions, and quickly changed his words to 4. After a pause, Cobra looked around carefully to make sure that no one was eavesdropping, and then spoke slowly. The Antonio family, the strongest family among the Tianlong people. Cobra told Loya in the first sentence of the reason why the 4 words Antonio appeared at the top every time. My ancestors established the world government with 19 other families 800 years ago. Although we were also very strong at the time, compared to the Antonio family, it was a little bit insignificant. It's even said that the Antonio family is the one who led the establishment of the world government. They found us together, in fact, just for a kind of stability. 800 years ago. Perhaps the Antonio family had detailed records of the 100-year blank history, and even the Neferutari family knew it. However, these things are still untouchable. Loya did not speak, and continued to listen to Cobra's story quietly. In fact, the appearance of the 5 old stars has only happened in the last 200 years. Cobra broke the news. Before that, the Antonio family presided over the world government and ruled that behemoth. Quote. Gollum. Tony's legs were a little weak, thinking about whether he should continue to listen. Arain, he positioned himself as Zephyr's follower. He was not prepared to get involved in these life-threatening matters, and he just stayed in the courtyard, watering flowers and reading books. Dominates the world government. Loya pondered the meaning of this sentence and grasped the point. That is to say, what happened later that made the Antonio family lose its right to rule. That's right. Cobra looked at the group seriously and said word by word, that was a carefully planned coup. Hearing this sentence, Loya's expression finally moved. In other words, the Antonio family, is it a group of Avengers? At this time, Cobra skipped this topic and continued to tell, what happened exactly, because our family has always been outside the Tianlong group, so it is not clear. It is only according to the description of the family's oral tradition. From after that, the Tianlong people lost their power, leaving only the kingship. So far, many years have passed, the world government is prosperous, and the commander of the 5 old stars is better and wiser than the Antonio family. Although there are countless pirates in this world, harassing the country and the people, but overall, the current world is better than Antonio's. During the period of family rule, there was some progress. Quote. Faced with this, Loya wanted to laugh, but didn't know how to laugh. Originally, everyone thought that there would be no major troubles in this world, and life could continue in such a safe and stable manner. But I didn't expect that a major event happened more than 10 years ago, which completely changed the pattern of the world. Quote. A major event more than 10 years ago that changed the pattern of the world. Tony blinked and asked, "What's the big deal? I was born at the time, why don't I know?" In this regard, Loya rolled his eyes at him, and said with a twitch, "Did you forget Roger the Pirate King?" Tony. Ahem, it's the fact that Roger became the Pirate King. Cobra coughed twice to interrupt the communication between the two. If only someone became the Pirate King, things wouldn't be so troublesome. It won't open at all. But what Roger said before the execution shook the foundations of this world. That sentence. Hearing this, the other three sighed. Want my treasure? If so, go to sea and find it. I'll put it all there. It is because of Roger's words that the era of the great pirates has begun. The runaway of the times will inevitably bring about conflict of opposites. Throughout the ancient and modern Chinese and foreign fantasy science fiction movies, there are various reasons for this. The strongest opposition in the world of One Piece is, of course, the two forces of the pirates and the navy. However, since Cobra dragged the matter out for discussion here alone, what he was referring to was obviously the inside of the world government, and there were also problems. Sure enough, then Cobra continued. The era of the great pirates continued to heat up and became more and more intense, and even when it was uncontrollable, the Antonio family attacked the 5 Old Stars. This incident must have been recorded in the Navy. Cobra turned to look at Zephyr. After all, those things happened back then, but your Navy was used as a gunner. Navy being used as a gunner. A smile appeared on the corner of Loya's mouth, and he seemed to have guessed something. Chapter 388 The Wind is Blowing. End of this volume. When Fa faced Cobra's question, Zephyr didn't seem to want to answer. 10 years ago was not far from now, and that brought back a very dark memory in Zephyr's heart. After a long silence, Zephyr finally raised his head and explained to Loya, "Yes. At that time, the world government told us that a group of gangsters boarded Mary Joa and were ready to assassinate the Draco." Quote. "And then you went?" Loya asked in surprise. To be honest, to say that the then Admiral Gang Ji Yukong didn't know the inside story, Loya was 100 people who didn't believe it. After all, he is the commander-in-chief of the dignified Navy. Even if he is scolded as a running dog of the world government, he is still a husky who dares to wrestle with his master. There are definitely more things that Cyborg Kong knows than everyone imagines. For this question, Zephyr nodded and did not deny it. This time, Loya said that it was really unexpected, but he understood that there might be some reasons that Zephyr didn't know. Move forward 10 years from now, that is, the year 1507 of the Haiyuan calendar. Counting the time, it happened to be the period when Cyborg Kong was promoted to commander-in-chief of the entire army and Sengoku took over as admiral of the navy. Could it be that such an arrangement is because of this incident? Regarding the details at that time, Zephyr, who had taken a back seat, was not clear, or even the rest of the people who were also involved in the operation at that time were not clear. Back then, Akainu and the others would kill every day covered in blood, and a heavy haze shrouded the entire Navy headquarters. This dignified atmosphere soon swept the world, so that the big pirates in the sea at that time also died down and did not dare to come out. But just when everyone thought the volcano was about to erupt, Sengoku and the others suddenly received an order from the 5 Old Stars, requesting that all operations be cancelled. A terrifying undercurrent that was about to sweep the entire world disappeared into the mist so suddenly. As if nothing ever happened. In the meantime, the Antonio family is still huge and suffocating, and the world is still moving slowly according to the previous law, until the wheel of time crushes all this into the dirt. After listening to Zephyr's narration, Loya held the teacup and sipped it, not knowing what he was thinking. Tony's hand was shaking beside him. These things are still too important for him. After a long time, Zephyr said, "This matter is different from your plan. No matter how rebellious your plan is, it will follow the general direction of the world government. Once you touch this matter, you are touching them. The bottom line." Quote. So, Zephyr looked around a few people on the field and said seriously, "Don't ask, don't probe, don't tell anyone about today's events. Trust me, the foundation of the world government has the power to sweep everything. To warn me not to go to Kizaru and Aokiji." Loya understood what Zephyr meant, and nodded immediately, indicating that he understood. As for Tony, looking at his appearance, he was about to swear to God by writing a blood book. So, let's get back to the point. Putting down the teacup, Loya glanced out the window. In that direction, there is a beautiful little castle that stands on the outskirts of Albana. If he felt good when he flew over, the guys at CP0 are there right now. There are so many bugs that they can be annoying at times, especially since these bugs can bite. CP0 can't move, but likewise, they can't move the historical text. Zephyr shook his head, expressing that he did not support Loya's idea. The two masters and apprentices for so long, he has already figured out Loya's temper. This time, maybe they want to send a warning to us through the hands of CP0. Warning. Looking back, Loya smiled and said nothing. Lieutenant General Loya, Lieutenant General Loya, this is the latest news report. Rushing up the stairs, Loya's adjutant brought in the newspaper that still smelled of ink and placed it on the table in front of Loya. Thank you so much. Loya nodded in thanks, then picked up the newspaper, and with just one glance, he saw the photo of Guy running in the desert in a state of embarrassment. The news was not afraid of the big deal and readjusted the color, highlighting the injury on Guy Duo's chest and the panic in his eyes. Guy in the photo just turned his head to the side, looked back, and seemed to be afraid of something behind him. And this news, the title happened to be from the staff of the newspaper owned by the Weston family. The specifics are like this. Shocked. How many beasts? Guy fled in embarrassment. The reason is because of this. To tell the truth, he just used to be a traitor to guide the other party's work, but he never expected the other party to understand so quickly. While complaining about the title, Loya opened the newspaper and looked at it carefully. However, unlike the fussing and grandstanding content of a certain shock department, this newspaper really recorded those shocking things. The arrival of Aokiji and Kyabu, the appearance of the four emperors, and the defeat of many guys, one by one, were shown to the world in a coherent manner by the editors. Especially in the battlefield after the war, they found a photo taken by the Alabasta National News Agency before, and then took a new one from the same angle. One is an endless sea of sand with rolling yellow sand. On the other, the ravines are intertwined, and the canyons are crisscrossed, like a huge labyrinth growing out of the desert. Such a sharp and strong contrast makes the world's understanding of the generals and the four emperors clearer. The might of a battle is truly earth-shattering. The whole desert has been beaten and changed. But, at the end of the news, the editor said something seemingly unintentionally. In the past, I heard the news that all the elites of the Navy were forced to defeat Guy Duo, and I thought that Guy Duo was strong. Now it seems that he also had the advantage of the environment at that time, making the Navy scruple each other and not dare to make a full shot. Facts have proved that in this no man's land, the two generals, Aokiji and Kizaru, made their unreserved efforts to defeat Guy Duo. Quote. The report did not add much ink to Loya, which is what Sengoku meant, and communicated with Loya in advance. After all, who called him a lieutenant? The rest of the vice-admirals are not as strong as his pervert. If because of the reports, the pirates feel that they can challenge the future of the Navy headquarters to show their prestige, then I am afraid that Sengoku will call the door immediately. After reading the report, Loya knew that Sengoku's plan to kill with a knife had been successful. Even he, the client, was shocked by the strength of Guy Duo, Qingzi and others, and suddenly had a peep on Guy Duo's position of the four emperors. This is enough to see the level of the editor. Public opinion, if used well, is more effective than any magic weapon. However, as a large group of pirates poured into the New World to provoke Guy, he had to prepare early. After all, the target of the pirates now is not only Guy. The newspaper said that although Guy was severely injured, Admiral Kizaru was also seriously injured because of it. He couldn't move even after recuperating, so he stayed at the naval camp on the edge of the desert for repair. The Navy's garrison in Alabasta has disappeared directly because of his departure. So in addition to Guy, can we also consider the issue of historical texts? This year is destined to be an eventful autumn. The sea appears to be calm, but in fact the undercurrent inside has made a dull growl, just waiting for a chance to drag countless lives to the bottom of the sea. Chapter 389 Close the Net. New volume starts. Please subscribe. Time passed by 10:10, and finally, it was time to close the network. In the past few days, Aokiji and Kayabu have not appeared in the public eye, although their reputation is so great that countless people take them into consideration. But for Alabasta as a whole, there are still plenty of places to avoid naval inspections. There is a gap, then there is no shortage of opportunistic guys. Batches of pirates quietly boarded Alabasta in a way they thought they were safe and concealed, but they didn't expect that their every move was actually under the surveillance of the Navy. It's going to be a mess if you continue. Zephyr said this to Loya. The number of pirates who landed in Alabasta during the period when Kizaru and Aokiji disappeared, there were more than 500 pirates with a bounty of more than 30 million baileys. The total number of pirates in Baston also exceeds 10,000. The number of pirates in Alabasta has swelled to an ultimate. Although it is still under control, once this limit is exceeded, even the reputation of two generals and Loya cannot be suppressed. What if you are afraid? When the volcano erupts, the potential is stronger than the human, and the left and right are dead, so why not fight it? At that time, once the panic spreads and swept through the whole of Alabasta, no matter how rich the Navy's results are in the future, it will also bear the accountability of the whole world. So, in the afternoon of this day, the three of them discussed together and decided to start planning. The first step is to mix the fake with the real. Pirates lurking in Albana suddenly discovered that a large number of navies protecting historical texts began to evacuate. In just a few hours, the historical text that was protected like a copper wall and would be interrogated for half a day when it got close to it, appeared so blatantly in front of them. As for the guards of the King of Alabasta who came to guard the Matsuri temple in place of the Navy, they were subconsciously ignored. Compared with the elites of the Navy, these old soldiers who lacked actual combat were weak and could not interest them. Could it be that the Navy abandoned historical texts? Someone guessed so, but was immediately corrected by the experienced old pirate. No, it is absolutely impossible. The news has already published the news. Even if the Navy fights to the last person, it must protect the historical text and bring it to the world government. This is no longer just a matter of face. Once there is a mistake, the current Navy will be cleaned up and down. And with the loss of historical texts and the disrepute of the Navy, the pirate frenzy will become even bigger, shaking the foundation of the world government's rule. This is completely inconsistent with their position, and Sengoku, the wise general, will not allow the three of them to make such a stupid decision. If the problem is so serious, why did they give up protection? Some people were more courageous, and on the second night after the Navy had just left, they raided the Matsuri temple overnight and came to the historical text. It really came to the front. As long as you stretch out your hand, you can touch the weathered ancient text on it. But, even so, no one came to stop them, and they didn't seem to worry about the safety of the historical text at all. Just as the group was in shock, a very secret message was finally asked from the guards of the Matsuri temple. It turns out that as early as half a month ago, the Navy brought the real historical text out of the city and put it here, but it was a fabricated piece of forged text. When they heard the news, everyone couldn't believe their ears. But looking at the guard who died in his hands with a horrified expression, they had to believe this incredible fact. Before that, this guard wanted to use this news to save his life, so he shouldn't tell him fake news. The next day, when the body buried in Matsuri temple was found, Kobo grieved and ordered soldiers to capture the pirates in the city. It was at this time that more and more clues were discovered by the rest of the pirate group. In the cave, which is full of stone chips and tools scattered all over the place, the traces left in it are exactly the size of historical texts. The guards who had kidnapped their family members also told them that the Navy had indeed transported a cart half a month ago. It was covered with black cloth and hay, and only a few edges could be seen. If it's not such a behemoth as a historical text, then what is it that needs a moving crab as a means of transportation? If that's the case, then the stone tablet in the Matsuri temple is really fake. Finally, when the latest news came, all the pirates couldn't sit still. Admiral Aokiji and Kizaru are recovering from injuries, and Lieutenant General Loya is ordering his soldiers to put a huge square stone on the tugboat. It seems that they are ready to set sail. The three are all here. Are you still going to sea? I see. At this moment, the pirates suddenly realized that the Navy had been using this fake historical text to blind them. In addition to the original guarding force of the Navy, plus a group of pirates who were at odds with each other, suspected each other and dragged each other back, causing them to be consumed in Albana all the time. And the original plan of the Navy was to secretly transport historical texts out to sea. If it wasn't because of the appearance of guys that caused the serious injury of Aokiji and Kayabu, and delayed the plan, I am afraid that when they really shipped the text away, they would have to stay in Albana stupidly. Figured out the reason, the pirates suddenly became excited. A large number of pirates poured out from various positions in Albana. Ignoring the attacks of the soldiers, they rushed out of the city gate and rushed towards Rape Flower Town. Not to mention the residents of Albana, even Cobra was stunned by this scene. He never thought that there would be so many pirates in Albana. The beggar who is said to be begging along the way because of pirates is a pirate. The newly recruited guard is a pirate. Even the group of refugees who set up shacks outside the city, there were actually dozens of pirates among them. Up and down the entire Albana, there are thousands of pirates. At this moment, they pulled off their disguise and all ran on the street, for fear of being a step behind others. The symbols of various pirate groups gathered together, and curses and shouts were heard endlessly. From time to time, someone fell behind and was swarmed by soldiers and chopped to death on the spot. If it was in the past, they would definitely kill all the soldiers who followed and attacked them with their backhands, but now it is different. One step is slow, and the historical text will be missed forever. After most of the pirates had left the city, Cobra came back to his senses, closed the city gate as planned, and was silent. Sitting in the small courtyard, Zephyr ate the apple cut by Ain, listened to the latest news that Ain brought back, and then said to Tony beside him, "It's up to you, find out the rest of the pirates." Understood. Tony grinned, and suddenly there was a lot of blood around his body. The pupils in those eyes shrank rapidly, and a circle of coquettish Yuhi light wrapped around the pupils, making him look like a monster. Cobra pushed open the gate of the courtyard at the right time and said to Tony panting, "Mr. Tony, there are still some pirates who have not left. Our soldiers are not their opponents, you." Before Cobra could finish speaking, Tony waved to his feet and stopped him from continuing. "Don't worry, they're dead." After speaking, Tony could no longer restrain himself, stepping on the moon and quickly disappeared between the buildings. Turned upside down. Chapter 390 Peeps from Ace. Rape Flower Town, 8 in the morning. Several huge naval warships were neatly listed on the sea, and a cannon was wiped clean, chilling and majestic. Behind Aokiji's main ship, there is a large pie-shaped tugboat tied to the tail of the warship, which looks like an ornament. In fact, it is indeed a decoration, at least for now. Leaning on the deck, Aokiji looked at the tugboat behind, then looked at the fake historical text that was being dragged onto the deck by the soldiers, and said to Loya on the shore, "So, it is clear that the warship can be fitted with stone tablets. Why do you have to prepare a tugboat? This imitated historical text is huge and heavy. If it is a light-capacity warship like an ordinary pirate sailboat or a wave breaker, it does need a tugboat to carry it. But let alone what Aokiji and Kayabu brought, even if it was Loya, he also followed several muscle warships when he went to sea this time, so Aokiji couldn't figure out what Loya meant by doing so much. And for him, the stone tablet that can be moved with one hand has to be left alone and let the soldiers move up little by little. Is it fun to waste time or what? Aokiji didn't understand, but Kizaru saw Loya's plan. He pretended to be seriously ill at the moment, sitting in a wheelchair wrapped in bandages, with Major General Lo standing behind him. Looking in the direction of the desert, Kizaru said slyly, "Don't you understand, Aokiji? There are too many things, and our warships alone can't carry them back." Too much. What? Hearing Kizaru's words, Aokiji was even more confused. Of course it's the treasure of the pirates. There are also those famous pirates. If you want to capture them all, our warships don't have so many cells. Without waiting for Kizaru to answer, Loya took over the conversation first. That's right, Aokiji suddenly realized. In addition to the sand crocodiles and flamingos, who have other businesses besides their status as pirates, who would put their treasures in a safe place and hide them. In addition, the forces in the Great Route are complex, and it is difficult for them to find an unoccupied site as a base. So generally speaking, the main ship of a pirate group is their treasure house. Especially the captains of those pirates, the crew will pay tribute to him after each plunder, so it is impossible for them to spend so much money every time. Excluding those captains with treasure plots, most captains like to sleep with treasure. There are so many pirates in Alabasta this time, even if only 1/10 or 1% of the guys carry treasure, it is an incomparably huge wealth. What's more, the real ratio far exceeds this data. Speaking of which, the headquarters really needs to be repaired. Qingzi touched his chin and said, "Even the courtyard where I live now is where Mr. Zepha lived before, and Marshal Qian didn't even give it to me for the renovation." Quote. Loya, so, where does your annual salary go? Not sure. When I came to my senses, I realized I was out of money again. At 9 o'clock in the morning, with the shaking of the warship, the huge stone tablet was finally dragged onto the deck by the soldiers. A huge beast skin sewn out was attached to one end of the stone tablet and pulled down at the other end. Dense rivets were nailed into the deck, pulling the hide tightly and straight. Thick hemp ropes were wrapped around the hide, and the joints were tied to the Jinchuriki column inside the deck. Loya went over to check it and nodded with satisfaction. As long as the animal skin is not cut and the rope is not cut, the stone tablet fixed on the deck will not move, and from the firmness, it will be fine even in the face of the storm. Okay. Inform General Aokiji that everything is ready and ready to go. Yes. Soon after, with a loud and long cry, the warship slowly left the coast and headed towards the sea. This scene fell in the eyes of countless pirates, making them more believe in the facts they conjectured. A pirate leader put down his binoculars, looked at both sides of the riverbank where other pirate groups were hiding, and said viciously, "They have already set off, and it will be too late if they don't start." "But Captain, just because we are not the opponents of those navies at all," a crew member cried and said a fact. "They are just a group of small pirates with a bounty of less than 30 million, not to mention Aokiji and Loya, those cannons alone can blast them into scum. They will follow." The pirate leader looked confident, then turned his head and said to a crew member lying beside him, "Go and tow the boat out." "Yes, Captain." Ait, who was in a daze, got up from the ground in a panic, and hurriedly ran towards the direction of the ship. Looking at the back of him leaving, the captain of the pirate group shook his head. "This kid, his strength is good, but his brain is not good. Every time he is called, it takes a long time to react." Soon, the pirate named Ait shouted the rest of his companions to drive the sailboat from the hidden place on the coast. He had a warm smile on his face, and the Madara on his cheek made him look a bit funny, but this a touch of hilarity made him more amiable. Looking at the pirates in front of him, Ait said loudly, "Captain, the ship is coming. You can leave at any time." "Okay, everyone check your weapons and get ready to fight." "Oh hoo." Raising his hands and shouting along with the surrounding pirates, Ait secretly put his eyes on the warship that had turned into a small black spot. Recalling the vice admiral I saw through the telescope just now, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Are you Christopher Loya? To prove to the bastard Garp, I must beat you. Loya doesn't know the identity of other people's child, which will make Ace feel resentment towards himself. Even Alabasta, who is in danger, will never forget himself. But so what? He is not afraid of any challenge. Then I'll be responsible for receiving protection in the middle. After all, I'm still a wounded person who can't stand up outside. Kizaru sat in a wheelchair, drinking tea leisurely. Beside him, Loya and Aokiji are also enjoying their lunch. There will be a war, or a massacre later. What if you don't have enough to eat? Warships have been sailing for a long time, and the coastline of Alabasta has completely disappeared at sea level. Looking around, the surroundings are all the same, the sea is still calm, and the breeze is gentle. But the three of them all knew what kind of undercurrent was hidden under this calm. The existence of the two generals, coupled with the famous Loya, such a combination, it is necessary to calculate the record of 3 people defeating Guy, and no matter how stupid the guy is, he must weigh whether it is right for the Navy. Loya had already taken this into consideration, so he let Kizaru stay with Major General Luo Wei to hide, pretending to be seriously injured. So, without a general level of combat power, those pirates saw the hope of winning. While eating, Luoya suddenly raised his head with a yawn. The other two looked at him and asked, "What's the matter?" In response, Loya smiled slightly, "Come on." Boom. The warship suddenly vibrated strongly, and the dining table in front of the three collapsed instantly. With the unpleasant sound of steel twisting, the warship of Aokiji stopped moving directly. In a panic, the soldiers came to report. "Report. We were attacked. The power system has been completely paralyzed. Let the Murlocs carry bombs from the bottom of the ship to blast them." Aokiji is a veteran powerhouse who has experienced countless battles after all, and he just wanted to understand the other party's plan in an instant. However, "Hey, Loya, can the money for repairing the warship be deducted from the treasure?" Aokiji asked, glancing at the billowing smoke from the side of the deck. "Even if it's another one, it's no problem." Loya finished chewing the big bones in his hands, and then broke it with all his strength, and threw the bones into his mouth to chew. "You dare to attack while Lao Su is eating? You guys are really in a hurry to die." Chapter 391 Ace's Little Move. As the warship stopped moving, it seemed as if it had been agreed, and a pirate ship suddenly appeared on the sea level, densely packed, like locusts, galloping towards the Navy. A door, rough or delicate, was pushed out by the pirates on the ship and aimed at them from a distance. Then, bang! A shell landed on the periphery of the warship's protection circle, and the waves hit the deck, overturning the two careless soldiers to the ground. It didn't even start fighting. Loya looked at the pirate ship strangely. In his original plan, the pirates, cannibalism was also an important part of reducing their number. "Who do you think I am? They don't have the guts." Aokiji glanced at Loya, and then gave the order, "Open the cannon." Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. The naval artillery is much more powerful than the old-fashioned cannons of the pirates. Neither the range nor the accuracy can be compared by the other party. In addition, the naval gunners are well trained and have many artillery pieces. One round of salvo, the group of pirates that hit suffered heavy damage. However, the pirates also understand that facing the fleet in front of them, it is a living target not to shorten the distance, so even if the cabin has been filled with water, they are still screaming and rushing forward. Those who rush the fastest have the best chance of encountering historical texts. But often the fastest ones are usually cannon fodder. "I'll leave this to you. The group of Murlocs haven't run away yet. I'll go and catch them back," Loya said, flapping his wings, and walking around in the air, he came to the side of the warship. The group of Murlocs, as Loya said, did not choose to leave after paralyzing the warship, and continued to swim to the next warship. They planned very well. As long as the warship carrying the historical text stopped moving, then the rest of the warships had to surround it. Anyway, the mission has been completed, and the remaining warships do not have to consider the sinking problem, so the amount of explosives arranged is aimed at blowing up the ships. However, when they had just arranged the explosives to run farther away to detonate, a chill suddenly hit them, instantly freezing them in the seawater. Even with it, a large piece of seawater around this condensed into a shell and was fixed together. As soon as he raised his finger, the ice cubes that wrapped those murlocs were lifted from under the ice by Loya. It looked so ugly, Murloc. Looking at the strangely shaped guy in front of him, Loya pursed his mouth in disgust, and drew a circle with his fingers in the air. Click. Bang. The few ice cubes were quickly covered with cracks, and then in a burst of Kiba acid squeezing, the murlocs inside were crushed into a lump of flesh. Next, Loya turned to look back at the pirate ships that were getting closer and closer. With a bloody smile on the corner of his mouth, the slaughter begins. Fire! Fire! The captain kept roaring, and Ace, whose alias was Ite, held the cannonball and ran to refill it, and then ignited the lead. Navy's artillery fire is too terrifying, it can't go on like this. Ace has also established the Spade Pirates for some time. He has been hunted down by Garp's guards many times, and he deeply understands the advantages of naval artillery. Don't look at the large number of pirates now, but before the distance was close, at least 80% of the artillery on these pirates could only interfere with the line of sight. On the other hand, the Navy used its own advantages to take advantage of its own time, and called out the pirate ships one by one. More importantly, there are not many pirate ships in front of them. When they are sunk, the cannons will come straight to them. Drowning in the sea without fighting Loya was not Ace's original plan. After thinking about it, Ace ran to the captain's side and said, "Captain, the artillery on the opposite side is too fierce, we will be sunk." Then what should we do? The captain was not an idiot, so he could see the situation at hand. But the pirate ship behind them is aggressive. If they dare to slow down or turn around, they will be bombarded by pirates for the first time. Although the naval artillery is dangerous, it is far away, and those behind the buttocks are firing face to face. I have a solution. Ace rolled his eyes and laughed sinisterly. A few minutes later, a small boat was let down. Ace raised his hands in a surrender gesture, and drifted towards the pirate ship behind. The kid on the pheasant boat. The captain of the pirate group hesitated for a moment, but still ordered, "Bring him up." Following the surrounding pirates, Ace stepped onto the deck with his hands bound. Even though he was surrounded by vicious pirates and his hands were tied, Ace was still calm and looked around with a smile. This made the captain's evaluation of Ace involuntarily increase by 1 point, but he still had a straight face and said viciously, "Tell me, kid. What's the matter with your captain?" He didn't think that a little guy like Ace had any qualifications to communicate with him, so he guessed that Ace accepted the captain's order to come to him to discuss things. "Hello, sir." Ace first gave a salute, bent over, and then said to the captain, "It's not that Captain Pheasant wants to find you, but I want to light a fire on your boat." "Stuff. Oh hey, that's it." Just as he was talking like this, the captain suddenly took out the musket from his waist and aimed it between Ace's eyebrows. "I'm really sorry, I don't allow others to touch it on my ship." "It's okay, I'm feeling sorry too." Ace grinned and suddenly pouted to the left. "Look." A group of pirates followed his line of sight, and they turned pale with fright. I saw that the cannon that was pushed out had been ignited, and the direction was just aimed at a large ship beside it. They had agreed not to attack each other until they had taken the historical text from the Navy. Although there is no basis, but at this time, no one dares to violate the rules. If they do, they will be attacked by focus fire from the rest of the ships. "Asshole." The captain turned his head and fired immediately without a word. Boom. But at this time, Ace had already left the place, and was easily untying the rope in his hand. The iron sand only left a bullet hole on the deck. Then, bang. Cannons fired. "Ah, Lala, did you start killing each other as you saw that it was getting closer?" "Sure enough, pirates are pirates." Aokiji put his hand on his forehead and looked at the pirate ships in battle. Did they think they would eat us?" Never mind, it just so happens that we can save some trouble. Sitting on the ice, Loya glanced at it indifferently, and then ordered the warship to divert its firepower and annihilate the ships in the other directions. At the same time, on the riddled pheasant pirate group, the captain leaned against the charred railing, looking at it in anger and despair. Cough. Why do you want to do this? Didn't you say you were looking for them to join forces? His chest was hit by a cannonball, and he would die soon, but before he died, he wanted to know the answer. Well. Ace buttoned his cheeks and ripped off the dirty jacket of the pheasant pirates. Then, wearing only shorts, he took out an orange cowboy hat from behind and put it on his head with the brim fastened. Smile, and, sad, badges. Everyone is a pirate, isn't it normal to use each other? Seeing his outfit, Captain Pheasant suddenly widened his eyes. Supernova, Fire Fist, Ace. Then he tilted his head and lost his breath. Chapter 392 Arrogant. As the Navy shifted its artillery fire, the battlefield slowly drew closer. There were no more ships in Ace's direction, and the Navy didn't pay attention to them. Because from that kind of melee, it wasn't a powerful pirate group. On the contrary, the stronger the strength, the easier it is to be attacked, and the more difficult it is to rush out. The remaining pirate groups, regardless of their strength, are indeed lucky. As the distance gets closer, the artillery can finally play a role, and this time, the Navy no longer has the calmness just now. What about less powerful and easy to blow up? The number is there. It seems that it was agreed that every warship on the periphery of the defense circle was baptized by more than a dozen shells at the same time. There were 2 unlucky ones, and even the mast was directly blown off, and the crooked one was about to collapse. Looking at the battlefield where the smoke is everywhere, Chingzi waved his hand and greeted Loya. Ready to work. Understood. Loya and him looked at each other, and in the blink of an eye, they flew high into the sky, and Aokiji also came to the other direction and stood on the outermost deck of the warship. General Aokiji, Ice Dragon Loya, what are they going to do? These 2 people were famous, and almost as soon as they appeared, the pirates trembled. But contrary to their expectations, the 2 did not attack it, but turned their eyes to the sea below them. Sea. Seawater. Water. Ice cubes. Suddenly, the pirates all reacted, and hurriedly turned around to prepare for a long distance. But at this moment, it was too late. Ice Age. The Ice Dragons. Roar. Crack clap. In the face of the 2 powerful freezing attacks, the sea surface quickly condensed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Ice Age of the green pheasant was like a mass of white waves, which continuously swallowed up the blue sea water, leaving a large ice layer. On the other side, Loya above the sky directly aimed at the pirate ships, and while smashing their ships, he turned his head to make the roar cover a larger area. The battlefield that was still full of smoke just now, suddenly everything was frozen. The 2 major ice attributes in the world joined forces to directly freeze the sea surface in a radius of 100 miles into an ice field. Hundreds of thousands of pirate ships were frozen in place by the terrifying ice before they could avoid it. From a high altitude, they looked like jerky pieces embedded in a pie. If they didn't understand the Navy's plan by now, they would have died on the fringes of the Great Sea Route. The Navy is ready to catch them all in one go. Sure enough, after the green pheasant stopped, a yuhi-colored flare was shot into the sky, and the thick yuhi smoke left a trace in the air, which did not dissipate for a long time. Seeing the signal, the Marines clenched their weapons and followed the leader down the deck. All troops, crush them. Loya roared loudly in the air, and a huge ice spear cut through the air and stuck on a pirate ship, announcing the start of the battle. The sound of fighting and shouting instantly resounded through the battlefield, and a premeditated war of annihilation began. The arrogant brat. When the battle was raging, a tall figure suddenly jumped up from the ground, with murderous aura in his eyes. Loya relied on his flying advantage to supervise the battle at a height of 100 meters, but he jumped directly to that height. And looking at his relaxed expression, this should not be his limit. This movement naturally attracted Loya's attention. Long-legged people, bald head, black, dollar, tattooed on their arms. Loya pondered for a moment, remembering that Aokiji asked him to take it back last night, but he threw it aside before turning a few pages. Information. The captain of the Bailey pirates who appeared on the first page. Is there a reward of 330 million Bailey? This name. Nami must like you. Not caring about Roha's self-talk, the big pirate named Bailey came to Roha's side, with a fierce whistle, kicked towards Roha's head. Go to hell. The leg strength of the long-legged clan is several times that of ordinary humans, and a long-legged clan with a little exercise can kick a wooden shield with one kick, not to mention Bailey, who has a bounty of 300 million. His kick, even a steel shield, can shatter it. The scene of Loya fighting with Guy did not appear in front of the world after all, and the traces of Loya were deliberately erased in the report, so in the eyes of many pirates, although the ice dragon Loya is strong, it is also limited. Just snapped. The crisp sound echoed on the battlefield, and countless pirates stared at the sky in stunned eyes, opening their mouths. Come on, just kidding. Someone actually took the captain's kick. The crew of the Bailey pirates broke out in cold sweat, looking at Loya who lightly grabbed Bailey's foot in disbelief. For some reason, suddenly, they had an ominous feeling in their hearts. Didn't your parents teach you not to put your feet in other people's faces? That's very rude. Or are you an orphan? With a sneer on the corner of Loya's mouth, he said slowly. You bastard. Bailey raised Yuhi's face, shouted angrily, and moved his body with strength from his waist, and his other foot slapped Loya like a whip. But snapped. With another crisp sound, Loya still easily grabbed Bailey's long feet. The Joker, but that's all. Shaking his head, Loya suddenly exerted strength and pulled Bailey in front of him. Clap clap. The sharp dragon claws pierced the skin and muscles, followed Bailey's feet all the way up, and soon stopped at Bailey's thighs, and buckled deeply. Hearing the screams in his ears, Loya smiled. Since you are not polite, then there is no need to keep these feet. Saying that, he stepped out and stepped on Bailey's crotch. The sound of the puff made all the male crotch cool down at the scene, looking at Loya in horror. To be honest, Roha just wanted to find a place to exert his strength, but because of the current posture of the two of them, he had to choose that position. Then, something even more terrifying happened. Stepping on Bailey's stride, Loya clenched his hands and pulled it out. Puff. Ah. That pair of feet that the long-legged people regarded as life was such an understatement. It was violently ripped off by Loya, and it was broken by the roots. The fractures at the thigh were uneven, and because of the severe pain, Bailey shook his feet involuntarily, causing the severed leg to keep turning, looking extremely miserable. Losing the focus on his feet, Bailey fell straight down, making a low, muffled sound. This voice not only echoed on the battlefield, but also coiled in everyone's heart. Good. So cruel. Too powerful. Ice Dragon Loya, so terrifying. After doing this, Roha froze the blood from his clothes and clapped his hands in the air. Then he smiled disdainfully at the pirates who were looking at him below, and said slowly, if it's all this kind of stuff, then you should kill yourself and save me trouble. The audience was silent. Even the pirates who were fighting with the navy in the distance fell silent, but soon, they boiled again. So arrogant. You are just a lieutenant general. So arrogant. Is it true that there are no pirates? A 300 million big pirate is only the third step existence among the big pirates on the scene. Just defeating him, where does the confidence come from? Soon, a figure stood up and bowed in salute to Loya. Meeting Lieutenant General Loya for the first time, in Bloody Earl Ulysses. Standing out was a pale-skinned man dressed in black Yuhi aristocratic clothing, a high hat, and a cane in his hand. Looking at Loya in the sky, he grinned, revealing two sharp-pointed kiba. For your request, please forgive me that it is difficult to do it. Because vampires, but cannot commit suicide. Blood Count Ulysses. Hasn't he disappeared for many years? He's still alive. Naturally, someone among the pirates knew him and immediately exclaimed. Aokiji looked at the medium-sized man, frowning slightly. I remember when I was young, he was a big pirate with a bounty of more than 1 billion, Ulysses, Earl of Blood. Chapter 393 The Terrifying Power of the Blood Earl. 1. It turned out to be that old guy. Sitting in the wheelchair, Kizaru narrowed his eyes slightly. I am too old to be able to do anything, so do you want to become the Pirate King? Behind him, Major General Lo looked at Aokiji, who was facing a formidable enemy in front of him, and asked suspiciously, General Kizaru, who is Ulysses? Is he strong? Hearing this sentence, Kizaru shook his head and corrected Major General Lo's statement. No, you shouldn't ask the question of whether you are strong or not, Mr. Lo. Before Whitebeard was recognized as the world's strongest man, he was the world's strongest man in the entire era. Hearing Kizaru's words, Luo Wei's eyes showed a look of horror, and he subconsciously held his breath. Looking at the figure who looked no more than 30 years old, Luo Wei couldn't help swallowing saliva. The strongest in the world. It turned out to be a guy of that level. Lieutenant General Loya, can he win? As Kizaru said, Earl of Blood Ulysses, just from the time of his fame, he is a veteran powerhouse earlier than Roger and Whitebeard and others, enjoying the period of Cyborg Sora and others as lieutenant generals. The strongest name in the world. If it was said that some other fellows of his generation appeared here, Aokiji would not have such an expression. After all, they are all old people, who should have been swept into the dust of history long ago, and even the Whitebeard has grown into that kind of virtue, and the powerhouse is older than him. I am afraid that few can still move. But it was him, Blood Count Ulysses. This made Aokiji have to be vigilant. Ulysses' specific age has not been verified, but according to the Navy's top-secret intelligence records, it can be known that 3 generations from the current Marshal Sengoku, he was already on the Navy's reward list at that time. And at that time, as soon as he went out to sea, he defeated all the pirate rookies at the time, so that the generation of pirate rookies was cut off, showing unmatched power. No one would be foolish enough to think that Ulysses grew from a penniless ordinary pirate to a megacy after he went to sea. After all, it only took a few short months. That is to say, before he went to sea, this guy lived for an unknown number of years, practicing a skill. Looking at his current face, he is only 10 years older than the photo on his first reward order. Therefore, the age of this guy may have to be calculated in 100 years. In other words, Ulysses is still in his prime now. The Earl of Blood, I seem to have heard the name. Loya raised his chin and thought hard. Not only him, but many pirates are also racking their brains to think about who this guy is. That makes the General Aokiji vigilant. However, with their age, they would never be able to get in touch with the era when Ulysses appeared. Loya, come here. The call of the green pheasant made Roja stop thinking, and with a promise, he flew down and landed on the ice. With Loya by his side, Aokiji was obviously relieved. Then, he said to Ulysses, who was standing silently across from the ice, today is really lively. I didn't expect you, who disappeared for almost half a century, to appear. Half a century. Hearing Aokiji's words, Loya's eyes suddenly widened. Disappeared for half a century. Just this middle-aged man. Are you sure you're not kidding me? How could he really be a vampire? After Aokichi's reminder, the message of Earl of Blood also spread rapidly among the pirates. Everyone looked at Ulysses dressed as a noble in front of them in shock, as if they couldn't believe what they heard. Aokiji was not surprised by the reaction of the others. His eyes were fixed on Ulysses. Then may I ask, what is the reason for your visit this time? In the face of the once strongest in the world, even Aokiji had to use the name, you. In all fairness, Ulysses was not a qualified pirate, and the most people who died in his hands were pirates. And he is not for wealth, not for the Pirate King, or even to form a pirate group. From his appearance to his retreat, he seemed to be playing a game. Tired of it, he left. Therefore, The attitude of the high-level Navy towards him is more of a kind of jealousy, rather than the hatred of ordinary pirates. But if he really wants to intervene in historical texts, then he will probably be on the must-see list of the Navy and even the world government. It is a pity that Ulysses did not let Aokiji continue to be optimistic. He gently turned his cane around his chest, and then bent down again to signal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Aokiji, the new admiral, I came here this time because of the historical text in your hands. If you have no opinion. If so, please give it to me." The new admiral. That sounds ridiculous. Aokiji has been a general for how many years? There are times when others are treated as newcomers. However, the person who spoke was Ulysses, an old monster who had lived for an unknown number of years. When he went to sea, Cyborg Kong was not yet an admiral, so there was nothing wrong with this sentence. After listening to his request, Aokiji sighed in his heart, knowing that there was no room to talk about this matter. The same is true for the yellow monkey at the back, silently taking off the bandages on his body. As he explained it, he complained to Luo Yasong's ability to cause trouble has improved again, not to mention provoking a guy before, but now he has provoked a Ulysses. Really, a little I don't even understand this old man. Recalling what Loya had done in the Navy, Rear Admiral Lo nodded sincerely in agreement. However, even if it was still 3 shots, he was still not very optimistic about winning or losing the battle. He was fortunate enough to follow his father to see the strength of Whitebeard in the New World. Even as a Navy, he couldn't help being overwhelmed by that powerful force, and he couldn't give birth to any thoughts of resistance. And the 3 of them now have never brought him that kind of experience. At this moment, Loya suddenly laughed. "Do you want historical texts?" Aokiji and Kizaru looked at them at the same time, wondering what he meant by suddenly speaking. Ulysses too. The strength that Roja showed before made his cold blood boil, but it was not enough to threaten him. At this moment, when he opened his mouth, was he going to refuse? Immediately, Ulysses nodded and replied without hesitation, "Yes." Boom. Before he finished speaking, a strong wind suddenly exploded from his side. The strong fluctuation oscillated out and blew everything around him, whether it was the ship or the ice. All of them did not escape the baptism of the shock. Some weak pirates even died in midair. That's the aftermath of the strong impact pushing out the air. Just the aftermath. It's enough to kill people. However, even in this terrifying attack, Ulysses still had a polite and noble smile on his face. He raised a hand lightly and blocked Loya's explosive punch. This is something that even Guy can't do. Seeing the surprised look in Loya's eyes, Ulysses the gorilla Yuhi's eyes flashed with blood, and asked with a smile, "What? Mr. Loya, do you have any opinion?" The answer to him was a series of continuous attacks from Loya. Ice dragons, frost fist, whiptail, sickle, headbutt. A set of attacks came out. I don't know if it was because he couldn't stand Roja's icy power. Ulysses let go of the hand that held Roja's fist. So taking this opportunity, Luoya did not hesitate to dodge away, return to Aokiji, gasping for breath. It was at this moment that the vibration that Loya stepped on when he left just now was transmitted. The surrounding warships broke free from the ice layer in a shock of Kiba acid, and swayed constantly on the sea surface. After taking off and landing on the deck, Aokiji looked at Loya, who was squatting on the ice floes and panting. The expression on his face was blue at first, then pale, and finally relieved. It would be strange if he didn't do it. After all, it wasn't the Loya he remembered. Smiling, Aokiji said to Loya, "How is it? Do you feel it? It was once called the strongest force in the world." "Ah, I feel so clearly." Moving his almost crushed fist, Loya looked serious and licked his dry lips. Chapter 394 One move to defeat the enemy. In the attack just now, Loya recalled the feeling of his fist hitting an iron block when he was an ordinary person. In the face of the hard metal creation, his flesh and blood body is so weak and insignificant, even if he exerts all his strength, he cannot do anything even if it is just a small piece of iron. That was the feeling, now he felt it from Ulysses. The name of the strongest in the world once lived up to its reputation. When the smoke cleared, the pirates looked up at the position where the two briefly fought, and their eyes widened in shock. How is this possible? Uninjured. Did you even block the attack of that ice dragon Loya? Looking at the unscathed figure, a group of people swallowed their saliva uncontrollably. Ulysses, Earl of Blood, turned out to be such a powerful number one. Thinking of this, they all felt sad again. Now that there are such strong men intervening and wanting historical texts, what chance do they have? Taking a breath, Loya turned to ask Aokiji, what do I do next? Give him the historical text. Aokiji understands what Loya means. Since it is not the opponent's opponent, then it is enough to do according to the other party's requirements. Anyway, that's just a fake piece of text on the boat. And that piece of real, it only takes a phone call to notify Zephyr to take it away. Since there is nothing to lose, isn't it stupid to fight an enemy you know you can't defeat until you are killed because of a little face? Who would like to throw their life in this place? It stands to reason that this is a very sensible approach. The Navy is not pedantic either, just let it go. However, Aokiji still shook his head and rejected this seemingly tempting proposal. Because Blood Count Ulysses, he is staring at his prey, but he won't let go easily. Although his expression was still calm, Aokiji had already seen the desire for blood in Ulysses' eyes. Even if they did admit defeat, a war is inevitable. Huh. Hearing Aokiji's words, Loya turned around. Sure enough, Ulysses' eyes on Yuhi, the gorilla, were staring at him, and an undisguised killing intent came straight at him. Am I already defined as prey? Noticing the eyes of the two, Ulysses also understood their thoughts. So, he took a cane and took a step forward lightly. Dangerous. In an instant, Loya's observation haki and dragon body sounded an unprecedented alarm bell. But at this moment, with a light pop, Loya had already flew out like a cannonball. Bang! 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 After running through 3 warships in a row, the aftermath of the attack finally disappeared. In the face of Ulysses' attack, he couldn't even dodge. Blowing Loya lightly, Ulysses stuck out his tongue and licked the blood on the claws protruding from his gloves. Stimulated by the blood, his eyes Yuhi's are even more gorgeous. Have you blocked the attack with your wings? The reaction is not bad. Ulysses said lightly, but without the wings, I don't know how you will resist next time. At this time, the rest of the talents were horrified to find that at the feet of Ulysses, a wing that was cut off from the center was cooing with blood. Dyeing the ice flows into Yuhi and flowing into the sea. Looking at that appearance, it is the pair of dragon wings behind Loya. As he spoke, he licked his fingers greedily, trembling all over his body. Oh, really huge vitality, fresh, warm blood, this feeling is really unstoppable. Loya. The warship under his feet was pierced by a single blow, and Roha's life and death were unknown. Aokiji realized what had just happened, and when he came back to his senses, he was extremely angry. He shouted violently, and a burst of ice Jinchuriki column shot at Ulysses. It's just that even Loya's sneak attack can't help him, and Aokiji's ice Jinchuriki column can't play a big role. Ulysses just raised his hand and smashed the ice Jinchuriki column that Aokiji sneaked up on him. Then Yuhi's black light swept across, and the green pheasant was also smashed into the air, landing heavily on the ice. No, incredible. Even Aokiji can't stop the attack. When the big pirates saw the green pheasant being blown away by a single blow, their hearts were filled with horror. Even though Ulysses has shown the strength to break the Loya dragon wing with one blow, they still did not expect that the opponent's strength would be so terrifying. That is the Admiral Aokiji, one of the 3 major admirals of the Navy, the most powerful in the Navy. Ignoring the surrounding exclamations, Ulysses put the blood on his paws to his mouth and sipped it lightly. Bah, the blood of devil fruit powers is still so unpleasant to drink. Spitting out the blood in his mouth, Ulysses looked down at the warship beneath his feet, as if looking for food that would satisfy him. No, he's looking for Lieutenant General Loya. Major General Lo in the distance understood in an instant, and his face was full of fear. As a Major General under Loya, he is well aware of Loya's seasickness. Just now Ulysses knocked him flying into the warship. Even if he wasn't injured, Loya's combat power was 3 digits after the decimal point, which was about 0. Attention all troops, focus on firing. With an order, Lo rushed to the turret on the deck and lit the lead. Bang! The jet-black shell made an unpleasant whistling in the air and smashed heavily beside Ulysses. Boom! The cannonball exploded, the flames covered the wood and iron, and the shotgun fell on Ulysses. But no matter what came, the other party didn't even blink his eyelids. The debris generated by the explosion hit Ulysses, as if hitting an iron plate with a rubber, and it scattered all over the place, and Ulysses couldn't help it at all. But it doesn't matter, as long as he doesn't have time to look for Loya, that's all Lo's purpose is. As the first shells fired, the Navy who reacted also launched an attack. But at this moment, they did not choose to get close as they did with the pirates just now, but instead aimed their weapons at Ulysses. Boom, toot toot. Bang. Rumbling. The dense rain of bullets fell on Ulysses mercilessly, wrapped around him in the blink of an eye, and shot rounds of artillery shells swept through the air in an arc, hitting him with all their might. The sound of gunfire and the screams of killing were linked together at this moment, and it was endless. The smoke of gunpowder filled the battlefield, exuding madness and despair. Not to mention a big living person, facing the Navy's instant focus on fire, even a mountain must be completely destroyed. In fact, that's exactly what happened. The damaged warship didn't last for a few seconds before bursting open in this violent attack. Boom! A cloud of mushrooms rose over the sea, and the smoke from the explosion was clearly visible from several kilometers away. And in that explosion of fire, a touch of golden light was fleeting. General Kazuna, Luo Wei, who was always paying attention to where he was, naturally saw the golden light, and immediately heaved a sigh of relief. But at this moment, a messenger hurried over and told him bad news. Report. The demon pirates and the shark pirates attacked our flank. The brothers suffered heavy damage, and the line of defense has been broken up. Now the 2 pirates are heading here. Coming here. Isn't that coming towards the historical text? These idiots, did they think they can take the historical text with them? Major General Lo turned his head to look at the flanks of the fierce exchange of fire. Immediately, he wiped his waist, and a silver-white knife appeared in his hand. Let the troops not stop attacking. You guys, come with me. Chapter 395 Guerrilla Yuhi Blood Prison. The One Devil Pirates and the Hammerhead Shark Pirates undoubtedly made a very stupid decision. Since Ulysses has clearly told Aokiji, he wants the historical text. Then, in addition to the Navy, his opponents naturally include all the pirates present. Even if they took advantage of the time when the Navy was diverting their attention to rescue Loya, they managed to come to the historical text, so may I ask, will the Navy, which is now firing on all troops to suppress Ulysses, will continue to contain it? Of course not. And the rest of the pirates, can they just watch as they fish in troubled waters and snatch away historical texts? Of course not. Therefore, even if they successfully break through the naval defense line and come to the historical text, I am afraid that they will be attacked by everyone, including Ulysses, at the first time. It is absolutely impossible to take away the historical text. Now their attack on the Navy is purely at the expense of others. However, they may be well aware of this. However, the situation on the field is already like this, and if Ulysses does not make a move, Ulysses will take away the historical text with an overwhelming advantage. So even if the death rate is over 99%, they have to give it a shot. After all, nothing is absolute. What if they succeed? With this kind of luck, the heads of the 2 pirate groups joined forces and launched an attack on the Navy. With his own personal guards, Lo soon came to the flank of the battlefield. The dirty and ugly pirates were constantly destroying the Navy's defense line under the leadership of their own captains. Bastards! Kill them all for me. At this moment, Luo Wei stared at Yuhi, and after saying the order, he wiped the knife and stuck it on the back of a pirate in an instant. The pirate was just about to shoot the Navy who had lost his weapon in front of him. Suddenly, he felt a little itchy in his neck, so he stretched out his hand and scratched it. Huh, what is this warm thing? With this thought in mind, he fell down with a blank look on his face. A big skull rolled around on the ground several times before being stomped on by Lo. Can you still fight, soldiers? Can. Then pick up the weapon and continue fighting. Lo hooked his foot and kicked the musket on the ground to the soldier, while he continued to rush to the next battlefield. The exchange of fire on the flanks was like a signal, and the rest of the pirates came to their senses and joined the battle in a frenzy. If it was before then, they wouldn't mind waiting for the Navy to be cleaned up by Ulysses before taking action. But since the good deeds of the demon pirates and the hammerhead shark pirates have ignited the fuse, they can't go up now. Everyone knows this truth. When the water is muddy, you can fish. In the face of the unmatched Ulysses, the Navy must not continue to stabilize the defense line. For a time, the battlefield became lively again. The Navy is attacking pirates, attacking Ulysses. The pirates are attacking the Navy, attacking Ulysses, and even attacking their own people. A variety of fruit abilities and strange weapons continue to appear on the battlefield, making people dazzled. Putting Loya in a semi-conscious state on the ice layer, Kizaru raised his head and looked around, covering his head. It's so confusing. Ace never imagined that things would turn out like this. He just came to fight with Loya, to tell Mr. Cap that he was no worse than other people's children. Inexplicably, the melee had already begun. And he himself was involved in the battle circle, let alone looking for Loya to challenge. It is not so easy to break out of the siege. Snapped. PFF'd. Once again, using the palm knife to cut down the attacking guy, Ace clasped his neck impatiently. Damn. It's not over yet. Taking time to look at the position of Ulysses, who had been silent since the Navy fired just now, he couldn't help but mutter to himself, isn't he going to be killed? If you don't die, you can give a reaction anyway. But even so, he had to prepare to leave. There was a lingering throbbing in his heart, and his sixth sense told him that something big was going to happen here soon. So he decided to leave first. Ace is not stupid. After selling the pheasant pirates, there is no place to hide his identity, so he contacted his deputy captain and asked him to come and meet him. As long as he persisted for another half an hour, no matter what happened here, it had nothing to do with him. I'll let you go this time, and I'll fight you next time. Thinking like this, Ace leaned towards the edge of the ice while coping with the surrounding attacks. Just after breaking through the crowd and seeing the sea, suddenly, a terrifying momentum swept in, making him freeze in place. The whole sky became hazy, a trace of Yuhi's breath wafted in the air, and even the sunlight in the sky dimmed. Inhaled into the nose, it is a strong bloody smell. Swallowed into the mouth, it is also a disgusting smell of blood. At this moment, not only Ace, but also Kizaru's movements became sluggish. The entire battlefield fell silent for a moment. I said, I want the historical text, don't you understand? At this time, Ulysses' flat voice came from the smoke. Everyone looked over subconsciously, but no one could see Ulysses in the smoke, only the pair of Yuhi's incomparable eyes, even if covered by smoke, still exuded a breathtaking Yuhi light. Makes it look very transparent. A bunch of filthy bastards, low-grade food. Dare to disobey my orders. Ulysses' voice echoed above the ice layer shrouded in blood fog, then let's all die. Chang Yuhi, blood prison. Puff. Puff puff. Along with his voice, the blood mist became more intense, and soon, even the mast in the distance could not be seen clearly. At this moment, the blood mist in the air suddenly moved. No one could see the trajectory of their movement clearly, but the movement of the sharp blade cuts made their hearts hang in their throats. Ah! Help! Help! I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I want to get out of here. Puff! The corpse was cut open from the waist, and the blood was sprinkled on the ice, which soon became cold. This bastard, does he want to solve us together? Kizaru sucked in a breath, and his face became very ugly. Although Ulysses was only a glimpse at the sea, his information was taken seriously by the Navy. After each operation, the Navy would arrange for a special person to investigate and study the battlefield for several weeks. Through the efforts of the seniors, Kizaru knew Ulysses, and naturally knew his moves. Gorilla Yuhi Blood Prison. Ulysses used this trick to slaughter all the creatures on a small island in just a few minutes. From rare beasts to mosquitoes, rats and ants, all creatures lost their lives under this move. A few minutes ago, the lively island was turned into a dead place full of corpses a few minutes later. According to the results of the naval survey, Ulysses can control the blood mist floating in the air and form a sharp blade to attack. How much the blood mist can cover, then how big is the attack range of this move? So when he saw the blood mist around him, his face became so ugly. At this moment, Aokiji clutched his chest and came to Kyabu. Not bothering to say hello to Kizaru, Aokiji shouted loudly, "Everyone! Jump into the sea!" Chapter 396 Master's Decision. Please subscribe. Sea Mile. Major General Lo hesitated for a moment, then dragged the soldiers around him, and with a puff, he got into the crack in the ice. Then the rest of the soldiers followed suit and jumped into the sea together. Regardless of whether they are fruit-capable or not, they all tried their best to enter the sea. The Navy at this moment has proved to the pirates that they are a disciplined team. Thanks also to the previous melee, the ice layer made by the two was only used for footing, and it was not very strong. Under the intensity of the melee just now, the ice layer had already broken and split, which made it easy for them to find a gap where they could sneak in. However, although most of the soldiers got into the water, there are still many people who do not have this convenience and can only try their best to run towards the edge. Because the location they are in is the ice created by Roha's Ice Dragon's Roar, which is wrapped in Roha's magic power. The hardness is outrageous, and there is no crack at all. The Navy is like this, then the pirates are even more unbearable. That's what Aokiji said, and the pirates naturally won't be as quick as the Navy obeying orders. Except for a few smart people, the rest of them looked at each other hesitantly, not knowing whether to believe him or not. Like Ace, he's a very smart guy. As the nemesis of fruit power users, although the seawater cannot make the ability disappear directly, most of the release-type abilities cannot penetrate the seawater and act on the creatures below the seawater. Ulysses' blood mist was apparently just floating above the sea, so no matter how dangerous it is safe under the sea. Without further ado, Ace took out a tube from Kabuto with one hand and put it to his mouth, blowing hard, and with the other hand, he wrapped a twine around his body and tied it to the stern of the pirate ship next to him. A large bubble appeared from the tube beside his mouth and kept expanding. When it became bigger than his head, Ace let go of the tube and put his head in. Then he closed his eyes. PFF'd. Jumped into the sea. At this moment, Ace is very grateful for the years when he used a small boat to sail across the ocean alone. It was the experience during that time that allowed him to practice the craft of steering and tying the sails with one hand. He is also very grateful to the friends who accompanied him to the Chambord Islands, because this bubble machine, which was used to save his life after he fell into the water, was a birthday present from them. Otherwise, he will definitely become like those guys. Looking at the head that fell from the sea, he pulled out a Yuhi line and slowly fell into the depths of the sea. Floating in the sea with drooping limbs, Ace swallowed with lingering fears. Really, thank you so much. Back on the ice, Ulysses' Yuhi blood prison has shown the power to terrify everyone. It seems that because too many people jumped into the sea to kill him, Ulysses accelerated the speed of the blood mist. In just a few seconds, the blood mist was no longer slowly spinning, but a mad roar. Every bloodline appears, it means that a human head has landed. In such a large-scale terrorist attack, those pirates and navies with insufficient strength were killed on the spot in an instant. The guerrilla Yuhi's blood prison spun for more than a minute, until he was sure that he couldn't kill the rest of the people. Ulysses withdrew the blood mist in a hurry. PFF'd. As soon as the attack stopped, Aokiji knelt on one knee and half on the ground. He was attacked by Ulysses head-on, and he also gathered a circle of ice that was enough to support him in the Yuhi blood prison for defense to protect Kizaru and Loya, which had already overwhelmed him, who was seriously injured. Now that the attack stopped, he breathed a sigh of relief, but he couldn't hold it any longer. Kazuna. Don't talk about Aokiji, your current wound needs to be treated. Kizaru interrupted Aokiji, frowning tightly. If you can break Loya's dragon wings, then what will Ulysses' attack fall on Aokiji? Looking at Yuhi's black wound on Aokiji's abdomen, Kizaru knew that Aokiji couldn't fight anymore. Because just now, it was inserted into the belly of the green pheasant and penetrated him. Listen to me. Aokiji ignored Kizaru's suggestion, panting with a pale face. You are fast, take Loya to go first, I will stay in the rear. Queen, do you want to die, bastard? Kizaru couldn't help being taken aback by the idea of Aokiji. He stayed behind and let himself go first. Facing the terrifying Ulysses alone, Aokiji has no chance of winning at all. There's no way out. Aokiji's lips turned white, his body kept shaking, and he looked cold. It's funny, right, a frozen fruit person would feel cold. But at this moment, Kizaru couldn't laugh. He knew that it was because the body temperature dropped due to excessive blood loss. This has nothing to do with whether it is a frozen fruit person. Aoki. Kizaru took a deep look at the green pheasant, lowered his head, and stretched his hand to Loya on the ice. Seeing this scene, Aokiji smiled with relief and waved at him. Come on, be sure to bring Ulysses back, and make the marshal be careful. Understand. Kiba bit Kiba and put Loya's hand on his shoulder, ready to activate his ability. But I don't understand. Suddenly, Loya's voice echoed in the small igloo. Both of them were startled by the sound, and looked at Loya, whose head was drooping. Are you awake, Loya? Aokiji hesitated for a moment, then spoke slowly. I don't understand. Luoya didn't seem to hear Qingzi's question, and continued to answer to himself. Why do you still have to run away when you can take his head back? The magic power vibrated, and the blue magic pattern became active for a long time, kept growing, and wrapped around Loya. Coiled in circles, his whole body was quickly dyed blue. A tiny bat is not worthy of letting the dragon run away. Looking at the weak Aokiji in front of him, the awakened Loya smiled slightly. Have a good rest, Mr. Kuzan. It's up to me now. Hearing this, Aokiji and Kizaru looked at each other, and the strangeness in their eyes was very obvious. If it wasn't for seeing, hearing, color perception being very familiar with it, they would probably have to think that this was a fake Loya. Bullshit. You've seen his power. You know who he is. What are you fighting him for? Aokiji sternly reprimanded. Now is not the past, and Ulysses is not as much as Guy. It's right to be obedient and run away honestly. Of course I know who he is. The blue color on Loya's body has spread all over the body, and layers of dragon scales began to slowly emerge. Animal type phantom beast, bat fruit, vampire form ability person, a fruit with a very obvious weakness. At this moment, Kizaru looked at Loya in surprise and pointed his finger behind him. Loya, your wings. In the previous attack, everyone saw that Loya's wings were broken and fell at the feet of Ulysses. At this moment, the wings that were stretched out from his back were actually intact. What's more, it looks tougher than before. Turning back along the line of sight of Kizaru, Loya smiled freely. This is my real wings, those before were just simulated by me after I became a dragon. Speaking of which, Mr. Kuzan. Loya turned her head and said to Aoji, if I can't change back, I'll have to trouble you to talk to Marshal Sengoku and help me make 3 meals a day. Reschedule. It's terrifying to know the appetite of a giant dragon. Chapter 397 Ice Dragon. As soon as he finished speaking, Loya's whole body continued to bulge, and the dense scales climbed up his cheeks little by little, and his expression soon became unclear. At the same time, the bones and muscles on his body were constantly shaking, pulling him towards an unknown form. Aokiji and Kizaru knew about what happened to Loya in the naval headquarters. Seeing this scene, why didn't they understand what happened to him? Immediately, Aokiji shouted anxiously, "Have you finally finished that move?" Yes, and no. Loya smiled slightly, but at this moment his face had turned into a familiar dragon head, which made the smile look a bit hideous. Anyway, the results are about the same. As soon as the words fell, a powerful momentum suddenly erupted from Loya's body. Unprepared, Aokiji and Kizaru were directly overwhelmed by this coercion. Long way. What a terrible and terrible power. Kiba clenched the Kiba pass, trying hard to keep him from kneeling down, but even though the muscles all over his body were shaking, he still teased vulgarly. Suddenly, this coercion suddenly intensified, and before Huang Yuan finished speaking, the whole person lay directly on the ice. And this is not the end, along with this momentum, is a soul-stirring terrifying force. Everything around, whether it is a warship or an ice layer, was torn to shreds by this power. However, when the dangerous force was about to press down on the two of them, it suddenly paused and passed over them. After doing this, Loya, who has already endured an ultimate, opened his mouth and spit out a dragon's breath. The clouds in the sky were torn apart, and the whole sea echoed with the mysterious fluctuations, representing the return of the peak of the past. Dragon body, 100%. Dragon power, 100%. Roar. Putting away the blood mist, Ulysses grabbed a pirate with decent strength and bit him on the neck. With the continuous transfer of blood, this unfortunate guy quickly aged, from middle age to old age, until he finally turned into a mummified corpse. After absorbing the opponent's blood, Ulysses didn't stop. He continued to grab another pirate, put it to his mouth and sucked it up. These are the big pirates who can survive in the blood prison of Yuhi the gorilla, the big men who can make the whole sea tremble just by stomping their feet outside. But in this area, they sadly discovered that the glamorous self in the past was just food. After draining the blood of several people in a row, Ulysses hiccups contentedly, the wrinkles on his forehead finally disappeared, and he changed back to the appearance of a middle-aged man. He has lived so long that he has forgotten who he was before. Waking up from the coffin this time, Ulysses was surprised to find that he was old. The vampire fruit allows him to absorb the lifespan of others to maintain his youth, but what he consumes every minute and every second is his own lifespan. This is the rule of time, and no one can break it. Everyone's lifespan has a limit. Since he can quantify the lifespan of others, isn't he also a quantitative unit? What happened after that was just as Ulysses had guessed, even though he kept his youthful appearance all the time, but when his own lifespan was exhausted, he was already dead. Now, he only allows himself to continue to live through the lifespan of others. He can exist like this forever. Although the lifespan of others is not his own, there is no difference in the effect. But he was not reconciled. Although he forgot who he was, there was an unforgettable memory that lingered in his heart all the time. Live well. These were the last words the man said to him. For so many years, Ulysses has also followed this sentence and lived well. But now he is actually just a corpse that can move, not alive at all. That's why he wants the historical text. Hades, if you really are the king of the underworld, then you should be able to help me, right? Years of reclusive life and humble origin, Ulysses did not know that Pluto was just a warship. Abandoning the shriveled old man, Ulysses, who had regained his peak, turned his head and looked into the depths of the battlefield. Although he couldn't see it, he could clearly feel that a huge vitality was awakening. That huge weight, even giant sea kings can't keep up. Who is it? Ice Dragon Loya. Ulysses, eyes brightened, and even though he had just been full, his throat couldn't contain his saliva. It's really mouthwatering. Aang. At this moment, a dull roar resounded through the world. A terrifying aura that seemed to come from the savage and ancient demons suddenly struck, forcing Ulysses to bend down before trying to block the ending of being blown away. And he is already like this, and the rest are even more unbearable. Under the control of Loya, all the enemies in the perception of the enemy of his life, without exception, were baptized by the terrifying dragon power at this moment. Unable to resist at all, those big pirates who blocked Yuhi's blood prison immediately vomited blood in Longwei and passed out. Boom! The hard ice layer is like a crisp biscuit, crushed by the giant. Suddenly, Ulysses felt a little cold on his face and raised his head subconsciously. Is it snowing? No, it is. Ulysses, who raised his head, was surprised to find that the sky above his head was blocked, and a huge dragon head over 100 meters long was looking down at him from the top. What fell on his face was not a snowflake at all, but an ice crystal dripping from the dragon's mouth. Damn! Ulysses was surprised that the other party was so close and he didn't notice it, but the next moment, he suddenly stretched out two wings behind him, and quickly went up into the sky. Then, boom, boom, boom. One claw was as huge as a house, and the entire dragon claw was photographed, like a mountain top down, and fell heavily on the ice. Those ice layers that were still intact even after various attacks were easily torn apart and thrown high in Loya's own attack. Affected by this huge force, it seemed that someone had dropped a nuclear bomb in the sea, and the terrifying waves formed in an instant, surging towards the surrounding area. Click! Kazuna supported the green pheasant to avoid the cracked ice crack, and gave a loud order, "Everyone, leave the battlefield." This level of warfare is no longer something they can participate in. At this time, you are still in charge of plans and tasks. GTND historical text. The most important thing now is to save your life. After giving the order, Kizaru shouted loudly to Loya, "Loya! Pull the battlefield away. It's up to you, in the sky or in the sea. Give the soldiers time to escape." Understood. After the dragon transformation, Loya did not lose his mind. He heard Kayabu's words clearly, and immediately flapped the wide wings behind his back that covered the sky, rushed into the sky, facing the Ulysses bumped into it. Chapter 398 Sweep and Crush. 1 inch This is. What a beautiful creature. Fluttering his wings and stagnating in the air, Ulysses stared in shock at the giant dragon coming straight towards him. It was a creature he had never seen before, a creature that only existed in myths and legends. The body is huge but not bloated, and every time it flaps its wings, it can leap hundreds of kilometers. Its limbs are slender, strong and powerful, as if stepping in the void, and the entire space trembles under the pressure. There are two forked antlers on its head, and two long and thin dragon whiskers are raised in the wind and stick to the left and right sides of its cheeks. A pair of golden vertical pupils are not angry and arrogant, but just a glance makes people feel fearful. This is the dragon. The master at the top. It is fierce, beautiful, and domineering. Wrapped in endless wind, frost and ice, it seems to crush everything. Not good. Suddenly, Ulysses turned pale in shock, and slammed his waist down. But his action was undoubtedly a bit too late. When he was lost for Loya's demeanor, the giant dragon had already come to his side and scratched it fiercely with one paw. Puff! Ulysses avoided the frontal impact, but his bent waist could not escape the bad luck. He was brushed by the dragon's claws. He was torn in half without being injured in any attack before. Blood spurted out high, and the air suddenly exuded a disgusting stench. It's the blood of the dead, the cold blood. A paw made meritorious deeds, and Loya's eyes flashed with surprise. But he didn't stop, immediately flapped his wings, twisted his waist, and the strong tail hammer with bone spurs smashed it back, trying to smash it completely. But unfortunately, it seems that this fatal injury is not dangerous to Ulysses. After breaking into two pieces, the blood on his waist quickly gathered, reconnecting the upper body and lower body. Feeling the explosion in his ears, Ulysses decisively raised his cane, trying to resist the attack. Bang! Rumble! A terrifying force struck, and Ulysses' cane, which was carefully selected as a weapon, was like a hemp rod, and it was broken in an instant. And he also flew upside down in this slamming blow. Vampire fruit, can you still do this? Loya thought silently. He felt the abnormality from the tail. Ulysses' body was like non-Newtonian fluid. His defense was not very strong when his attack just arrived, but as the attack continued to deepen, Ulysses actually produced a powerful rebound in his body. He did knock it flying, but the wound was probably only on the surface. If that's the case, let's try this. True ice dragons. Roar. From the eyes of the people on the ice floes below, Loya first hit Ulysses at a speed that did not match the huge body at all and was too fast to understand. Then before turning around, a tail swept out, knocking it away from afar. After doing this, he kept turning his head for a moment, and an ice storm that covered the sky spewed out of his mouth, hitting the little black spot in the sky straight. Rumbling. Terrifying explosions were constantly heard above the distant sky, and the cold wind began to whistle, stirring the clouds. The scene was like the end of the world. Busy leading the soldiers to board the ship to escape, Kizaru took the time to glance at the sky, and was so frightened. Hey, this kind of power. Let alone defeat us, it is enough to challenge the 4 emperors. That was once the strongest in the world, Earl of Blood Ulysses. Unexpectedly, he was beaten 3 times by a set of qualities by Loya without the ability to fight back. This strength can no longer be described with the word horror. Loya. Hearing Kizaru's words, Aokiji frowned. Why, compared to that time when he transformed in the headquarters, Luoya's body size will become so much bigger. The last time there was such a big commotion in the courtyard could be concealed because the size of Loya's dragon transformation was not as huge as it is now. What did he mean when he said, yes and no? And what exactly is dragon's appetite? These doubts made Aochi uneasy, but at the moment he had no way to know the answer. He could only wait for Loya to end the battle, hoping that he would answer it for himself. The roar of the ice dragon lasted for a whole minute, and it was not until snowflakes began to float from this side of the world that Loya finally stopped. The continuous breathing made his lungs a little uncomfortable. He took a slight breath, and a gust of wind was generated in the sky. Then, Loya widened her eyes in surprise. It's not dead yet. In the perception of the enemy of living beings, Ulysses' aura was erratic, and the life force from other places continuously disintegrated and then condensed. It seemed that the situation was very bad. But even so, that's not a death. Even those vitality are still quickly stabilized, so that Ulysses' breath gradually stabilized. Sure enough, we still have to start from the weak point. Loya narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking about the plan. Eudemon's vampire fruit. This is a fruit that did not appear in the original work, and only appeared in a pirate game in the previous life. From the beginning, Loya felt that blood count was very familiar because he had played that game before. For this fruit, he was most impressed by the ability of Baroric Redfield, Earl of Yuhi, to absorb the lifespan of others. With this kind of power, the capable person can even live forever. Keep regaining your youthful state. But he is the frost dragon. Although I don't know why he still maintains the body of an ordinary dragon, there is no doubt about his perception and control of vitality. Just at a glance, he realized that although Ulysses had a huge vitality, the feeling of being out of tune with his body was very obvious. There is a mysterious force that imprisoned those life forces in his body, unable to escape, and used by him. Perhaps it is the ability of the vampire fruit that allows Ulysses to survive through the life force of others contrary to common sense. But for Loya, who was born to control his vitality, this Ulysses' biggest advantage is actually his biggest weakness. I don't believe that without the supplement of vitality, you are not dead. The quality of the 3 companies did not kill him, which made Loya very unhappy. I have already paid such a huge price, and I still can't clean up your old antique. Thinking of this, Loya fluttered his wings, his huge body rolled forward on the clouds, and quickly approached Ulysses in midair. Ulysses is not in a good state at the moment. Although the upper body and lower body have healed and closed, the life force consumed is very terrifying, especially the terrifying dragon breath of Loyana, which is rich in magic and dragon power. He made it worse. Powerful, so powerful. It's a one-sided crush. Ulysses had forgotten how long he had not felt this near-death feeling. In order to resist the freezing effect of the dragon's breath, he kept wrapping himself with blood energy, and now he has run out of oil. The remaining vitality in the body is constantly boiling, trying to get out of his control. Must be replenished as soon as possible. Ulysses made a quick judgment. At this moment, the light around him suddenly dimmed, and above the clouds, the huge claws pressed against Ulysses' head mercilessly. Puff! This time, Ulysses couldn't dodge the attack because of the high consumption, and one arm was thrown high. Then, the broken arm was pulled back by the blood Jinchuriki column length from the fracture, and it grew back to the body. Everything was done subconsciously. Ulysses turned his head and looked at Loya solemnly. Feeling that the other party's vitality was reduced by 1 point again, Loya looked at him with interest, as the ability of the vampire fruit. It's really interesting. Chapter 399 Destruction. 1. Mr. Loya has won the award. This is the ability obtained after the awakening of the lower fruit ability. It can not only restore youth by absorbing the life of others, but also can transform the body into the blood god form, ignoring most of the attack. Ulysses looked sideways slightly, then politely smiled and answered Loya. You are really too polite. Loya narrowed his eyes, and the thick kiba appeared and disappeared, as if he was ready to eat him at all times. Or, are you deliberately showing your self-cultivation? Well, I am sorry I can't tell you. Seeing the haze flashing across the other's face, Loya felt that he had caught a secret. It does seem so. Let me guess, you used to live at the bottom of society. Every day in the alleys and garbage dumps, between wild dogs and low-level gangsters to survive. You yearn for the noble life of a superior man, so you force yourself to imitate them. Looking at Ulysses's surprised eyes and then falling into memory, Loya smiled and continued. But, you were so small and humble in the past, so low and disgusting. Your imitation only brought ridicule, humiliation, pain and fear. So after you gained great power, then I bid farewell to my past self, put on a mask, and turned into a noble blood count. To this day, even in the face of me, you still maintain your noble posture and dare not let go. Because once you let go, it means that you have left the status of the blood count and become the one you used to be. Small, pitiful, low self. You said, am I right? Ulysses, Earl of Blood. No calm expression or body language could hide the fluctuations from the soul. Loya smelled the pain-filled breath on Ulysses. And this breath became stronger and stronger with his words, so that his whole person was shrouded in despairing sadness and pain, exuding a thick silence. He dared not say that his guess was right, but he could guarantee that Ulysses definitely recalled something bad. After listening to Loya's guess, Ulysses clenched his fist and put it down. He finally remembered how he used to go from a lowly person who could only eat with wild dogs in the rubbish heap. A pariah, step by step to where he is today. It was definitely not a good memory. Because he betrayed the person who trusted him most. In exchange for today's power. But even in the end, that person did not resent himself, but let himself live well. Huh. Suddenly, Ulysses' drooping eyelids fell silent. Then, he suddenly raised his head, looked at Loya who was very interested, and sighed. I have to say, you guessed it right. So sorry, I have to kill you here and hide this secret. At the end of the conversation, Ulysses' voice suddenly became icy, and he no longer had the courtesy and restraint he had before. At this moment, the figure of a gorilla, Yuhi, disappeared in an instant and submerged into Ulysses' body. Those vitality that were still in the rebellion suddenly received supplies from the outside, and immediately disappeared again. A huge and unparalleled terrifying aura came from Ulysses' body, and even the space trembled under this force. Compared with the peak state he showed before, it was several times stronger. In fact, it is also correct to think about it the other way around. The so-called peak state is just a period when a person can exert his peak strength, but it does not mean that the peak state is the strongest strength of that person. Ulysses' peak state can instantly defeat Aokiji, and his outbreak can undoubtedly silence the whole world. Under the shroud of endless blood, Ulysses fiercely looked at the huge ice-blue creature in front of him, and slowly opened his mouth. "Thank you for your delay, Mr. Loya. I do it, my clone may not be able to bring back so much vitality." Quote. "Oh, is it? So what are you going to do?" Glancing at the food that fell on the ground in a mess below his eyes, Loya was also shocked by the power Ulysses showed. There is no doubt that the dragon transformed himself can beat Ulysses in his peak state. But when Ulysses entered an explosive state, this power could not be neglected even by himself. It was the terrifying power that erupted together after he absorbed the vitality of the 321 famous pirates below. Even if the individual strength of those pirates is unsatisfactory, when 300 are connected together, a qualitative change will occur. But even so, Loya's tone was still flat, and he didn't seem to be worried about Ulysses' next attack. "Of course I'm going to kill you." Ulysses tried his best to suppress the majestic vitality in his body. He didn't notice the strangeness in Loya's tone, and only regarded it as the pride and self-confidence of Loya's dragonization. "Dragon, isn't that how it should be?" So he raised his hand, and dangerous black Madara dots appeared in his palm. Those black Madara continued to condense, forming a black sphere in the blink of an eye. The surrounding light was submerged under the pull of the black ball, and invisibly, a shrill scream echoed in Loya's ears. "Wail in agony in endless torment." Ulysses roared loudly, aimed the black ball at Loya, and threw it fiercely. Crying abyss. Under the gaze of the two, the black sphere was out of control, quickly flew to Loya, and then when it was about to be attached to Loya. Puff. How is it possible? What the hell is going on? Ulysses widened his eyes in disbelief, looking at the place where the black ball suddenly dissipated, unable to return to his senses for a long time. Puff. Loya couldn't help laughing softly. "Didn't you find that the blood brought back by your avatar was mixed with something special? After all, this kind of thing. I will too." After all, a figure appeared next to Loya's huge head. But unlike the previous clone, the clone at the moment maintains the appearance of Loya Dragon, and no longer has the form of the previous human. After Loya finished speaking, his clone bent over to Ulysses, and then condensed a mass of turquoise energy in the palm of his hand. That kind of thing, even if Ulysses didn't know it, he still felt the thick dead aura coming from above. He subconsciously sensed the situation in his body, and his eyes suddenly widened. As expected. In the blood that was brought back by the clone, the green energy was constantly swallowing up his vitality, transforming it into a power that Ulysses did not know. "What the hell did you do?" Ulysses bit Kiba and gnashed his teeth. With a wave of his claws, a yuhi-colored blood shadow claws slashed at Loya fiercely. But like the black balls before, these blood energy dissipated directly when they approached Loya. In other words, it did not disappear completely, but when it was close to Loya, the vitality was transformed into something new by the green energy, which was absorbed by the other party. "Introduce yourself formally." Under Christopher Loya, the Dragon Slayer of Ice, the master of the power of the Frost Dragon. Raising a sharp claw, Loya slowly tapped it on the shocked Ulysses' forehead. "I am the real expert in controlling life force." Ice Dragon Slayer. What is that? Isn't he a fruit-capable one? In endless doubts, Ulysses gradually lost consciousness. Chapter 400 Loya Who Can't Change Back. After Ulysses died, the fruit power disappeared, and the life force that he devoured poured out of the body and returned to their respective masters. A big pirate sat up from the ice, panting heavily like drowning. After a long time, he looked up at the sky absent-mindedly and touched the Kiba mark on his neck. "The knot. Is it over?" The ability of the fruit ability person will disappear with the death of the ability person. Except for the release type attack of the natural system, the rest of the ability follows this principle. In the 4 Cs, a devil fruit ability person is an extremely rare thing, and the people there do not know the information that the ability person will have after death. But this is the Great Root, the dreamland of pirates all over the world. The first reaction of these great pirates after waking up was that Ulysses was defeated. Then, what? The blood count has failed. Just kidding, such a powerful being. When groups of pirates were scrambling, a musket was aimed at them. Don't move. Raise your hand. The pirates turned around in surprise. Navy. Hey, you guys are really bold. How dare you arrest Lao Su? A pirate captain smiled strangely, and took out the big knife on his waist. If I were you, I would choose to surrender honestly. Suddenly, Loya's voice echoed in his ears. Hearing this sentence, the terrifying figure he had witnessed before he passed out reappeared in his mind, making him unable to move the hand holding the weapon any longer. The pirates gulped their saliva and turned their heads to look. I saw a huge creature coiling in the sea behind them, like a mountain, majestic and majestic, unable to see the end at a glance. The sea water that is as deep as 100 meters has just passed the bent knee of the creature. With every breath it takes, it can set off terrifying waves that make the sea tremble. And it is this behemoth, who is watching them quietly with those golden vertical pupils exuding endless majesty. In the face of the dragon, no one can keep calm, let alone the courage to fight. The pirate is also a big man with a bounty of more than 500 million, but he knows that his resistance can only be described as ridiculous in the eyes of the other party. With a sigh, he threw the weapon in his hand into the sea. In this regard, Loya nodded lightly with satisfaction, and then continued to rest on his stomach. Most of the pirates lost their lives in Ulysses' Yuhi blood prison. Although the number of remaining pirates is large, in the face of Loya, who defeated the once world's strongest Earl of Blood, they did not at all. Unable to gather the courage to fight. Soon, the Navy put handcuffs on them one by one, and some powerful guys were tied up with 5 flowers and used halu stone locks. The Navy suffered heavy damage in this supposedly easy encirclement and suppression battle, and at least thousands of people left their lives here. Only a few hundred people were able to find complete corpses. More are evenly distributed in this sea. Even if so many powerful pirates were arrested this time, and the credit was huge, no one could laugh at this moment. But they are more a kind of reverence than sadness. Looking at the giant dragon resting with its eyes closed on the sea, all the soldiers had deep respect in their eyes. Kizaru told them that their Lieutenant General Loya was no longer able to return. In order to save their lives from Ulysses, he would live as a dragon all his life. While the soldiers were escorting the pirates to the surviving warship in an orderly manner, after emergency treatment, the bandaged Aokiji came over with a jug and sat cross-legged on the ice floe in front of Loya. Kazuna said, "You can't change back, is that true?" "Worse than that." Loya raised his eyelids and glanced at the jug in Chingzi's hand. "It's the good wine that you have been holding for decades. I smell the same as boiled water now." The dragon's sense of smell and taste, and human beings, are 2 completely different systems. Quote. "So until now you've only been concerned with your appetite." Chingzi silently picked up the wine glass, filled it up for himself, and suddenly laughed. "But this is also a good thing. No one will dare to grab wine from me in the future." Call out. A golden light flew from a distance, and a yellow monkey landed next to the green pheasant, and greeted Loya vulgarly, "Yo. Ching pheasant, Luo Yisong. Your Excellency the dragon." He grabbed the wine glass from Aokiji's hand, put it to his mouth and sucked the wine clean, and put it back. "The pirates have almost been escorted. Let's take a step ahead later. Who of you is responsible for burying the body?" Did I do something wrong? Why are you looking at me like this?" Feeling the gazes of the two, Kizaru asked in confusion. Looking at the wine glass above his hands, Aokiji blinked and sighed. "It's nothing. My crow's mouth is more effective." But then, can't you take care of me? I'm wounded now. Yellow monkey. So many corpses sank in the sea, and some were washed away by the undercurrent. It is obviously impossible to find them all and bring them back. But it is obviously impossible to let the soldiers' bodies, Mukuro, float in the ocean and be bitten by unknown fish and shrimp. Therefore, Kizaru decided to bury the broken corpses Mukuro on the spot together. Of course, this task requires two ice attribute abilities to carry out. All come. Loya shook his huge head, and the waves he brought up made the ice floes on which the two of them stood up and down, almost being overturned in the sea. Mr. Kuzan's wound hasn't healed yet, so don't use this kind of large-scale freezing. It's really a real apprentice. I understand. Kizaru sighed, and then turned into a golden light and left the place. Now that Qingzi was seriously injured, Loya turned into a dragon, and he was the only one who could take charge of the overall situation. After confirming this matter, he has to contact Alabasta and Sengoku to discuss the protection of this cemetery and deal with all kinds of troubles. After Kizaru left, Aokiji filled himself with wine again and asked solemnly, "Really? Can't you change back?" "Yes." Loya sighed. The dragon transformation is the inevitable result of the dragon slayer's continuous erosion of the body by the power of the dragon in the process of using the dragon slayer magic. This state is not a negative attribute and can be removed and cured. It can even be said conversely that he is the true form of the dragon slayer sorcerer now, and the true face of the dragon slayer sorcerer. It's just as normal for a child to grow into an adult over time. Understood. Qingzi sipped the old wine in the glass with a sip, stood up, and stepped on the ice road to leave. Suddenly, he turned his head and said to Loya, "Although there is no record, I believe that there must be some way to make you change back." There is no need to elaborate on the relationship between the two. Loya knows that Aokiji decided to spend his life to find a way to change himself back. "Maybe," Loya replied, and continued to lie on his forelimbs and closed his eyes to rest. After turning into a giant dragon, he also seemed to have acquired that sleepy instinct. When he lay down again, he saw a small sailboat that was sneaking away along the ocean current. After thinking about it, Loya gave up the plan to sink it. After all, he was too sleepy, and he had no interest in going to fight with Garp, who was full of fire.